Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I was driving out near McPherson County last August, just poking around some back roads where the GPS cuts out. I do that sometimes, bring the dog, fill a cooler with gas station stuff, and just go. I used to do a bit of photography, so I'd scout for old barns and silos. Kansas has no shortage of those. Most are half collapsed or rotted to hell, but every now and then you find one that's still standing, just forgotten. I had my mutt, Ruckus, in the back seat. He's part healer, part whatever made him run in circles when he's excited. Good dog. Doesn't bark much. We'd been driving maybe 4 hours and the sun was starting to hang low. That kind of dry, hot dusk where everything's orange but the air's still thick and warm. I spotted a cluster of buildings behind a line of wind-warped cottonwoods. Old farmhouse, big red barn, a couple sheds. No fence, no signs, not even a mailbox. Just gravel crunching under the tires and then hardpack as I pulled in. Ruckus hopped out first and started sniffing around. I followed, grabbing my camera bag and a flashlight even though it was still light out. The house was nothing special. All boarded up, roof sagging. I didn't bother going in. The barn was more interesting. Tall, weather-beaten, but intact. One side had caved in a little and you could see an old grain chute hanging crooked from the loft. I went inside, gave Ruckus a whistle when he wandered toward the far field. Inside, it smelled like dry rot and mice. Sunlight cut through gaps in the planks like blades. I took a few shots, mostly texture stuff. Rusted hinges, old signage half covered in grime. I didn't hear anything weird, not yet. Just the usual, birds outside, Ruckus's nails ticking on concrete. When I stepped back out, the air felt off. Like someone had turned down the volume on everything. No birds, no bugs. The trees weren't moving even though I could have sworn there was a breeze earlier. Ruckus was sitting about 20 yards out at the edge of the field behind the barn, staring straight ahead. Not sniffing, not pacing, just locked up, ears forward, tail down. I called to him. He didn't move. I figured maybe there was a deer or coyote out there, so I started walking over. Grass was knee-high and dry as paper. It rustled under my boots but didn't sway. I didn't notice right away what I was walking toward. There was a clearing out in the middle of the field. Big one, at least 50 feet across, maybe more. Crops, some kind of sorghum or millet I couldn't tell, had been flattened, but not like wind or machinery. It was too clean. Every stalk laid down the same way, all in a tight spiral pattern, clockwise from the center out. No breaks, just bent clean at the base. Perfectly smooth. I stood there looking at it, then back at Ruckus, who still hadn't moved. His ears were trembling a little now. I walked into the spiral and that's when it hit me. The air wasn't just quiet, it was dead. No wind, no bugs, no planes overhead, no highway hum in the distance, just the sound of my own breathing and the crunch of my boots. The center of the spiral had a small indent, like someone had pressed a single foot into the dirt and pivoted. No boot tread, no prints, just a shallow swirl in the soil, bare and dry. Ruckus whined. That's what finally broke it, a low, drawn-out whine I'd never heard from him before. He turned and bolted back toward the car. I didn't stick around much longer. I walked out of the spiral and back through the barn. The air felt heavier, like there was static in it. I kept checking over my shoulder. Nothing there, just the same trees and fields. But everything felt wrong. Like I was being watched, but not by anything with eyes. More like the place itself was watching, if that makes sense. When I got to the car, Ruckus was already inside, curled on the back seat, shaking. I got in and shut the door and sat there for a second with my hand on the wheel, just listening. Still no sound. I turned the key and the engine coughed but didn't start. Tried again, nothing. The radio flashed on for half a second, then off. No cranking, just silence. Battery light came on, even though it was new. I sat there staring at the field through the windshield, trying not to panic. I pulled out my phone. No service, but it showed the time, 6:47. I remember that because it felt later than that, way later. The sun hadn't moved much, but I was sweating and tired like it had been hours. After a few minutes, I tried the key again. This time it started like nothing had happened. Ruckus let out a huff, but stayed curled up. I reversed, backed down the dirt lane, and didn't look in the rear view. The weirdest part came when I checked the photos later. I'd taken at least 20 shots inside the barn, detailed stuff. Light beams, rust, shadows. Every one of them came out fine, but the last shot I took, the spiral in the field, was just black. Not blurry, not overexposed. Just completely black, like the shutter never opened. The frame before it was normal, a shot of the barn's exterior as I walked out. After that, nothing. I checked the metadata, and the timestamp for the black photo was 5:06 p.m., over an hour earlier than what my phone said when I was sitting in the car. I didn't tell anyone about it right away. What would I even say? Hey, I found a crop circle and time doesn't work right out there. People already think I spend too much time alone, but I've gone back through that area twice since, just to see if I can find it again. I never did. Even the barn's gone. Not collapsed, just gone. Like it was never there. We were already asleep when it happened. I think it was around 2:40 in the morning, but I'm not totally sure because the clocks were all screwed up afterward. What I remember is a flash, like lightning, but brighter. It lit up the entire bedroom for a second, and then it was just dark again. No thunder. No sound at all. Mara sat up next to me, squinting at the window. She thought maybe it was a transformer blowing down the road. We live in a pretty quiet cul-de-sac outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Nothing crazy ever happens out here. Just a row of houses, woods behind us, the Blue Ridge a few miles off in the distance. It was a cool night, maybe low 50s, and totally clear. I got up to check just in case. Our dog, Kip, didn't even bark. That should have been the first red flag. He's a mutt, part cattle dog, part who knows what, and he loses it if someone so much as walks past the mailbox. But that night he stayed curled up in his bed by the dresser, eyes open but still. I pulled the curtain back. The street was empty. Not a single car. Nothing glowing or sparking, no wind, no hum. Just quiet. Almost too quiet, now that I think back. There's always some kind of noise out here. Crickets, wind through the trees, a car in the distance. But it felt like the whole neighborhood had just stopped. When I went to check my phone for the time, the screen was black. Not off. Black. Wouldn't respond to the charger, wouldn't reset. Just dead. I checked the digital clock on my nightstand. It was blinking 12:01. That's when I noticed the hall light was already on. We always keep it off at night. Kip's sensitive to it. But it was on, casting that weird yellow glow into the bedroom. I walked out thinking maybe Mara had turned it on and forgotten, but she was still in bed, just sitting up, listening. We went through the whole house together, in like one room at a time. Every single clock, the one on the stove, the microwave, even the old radio clock in the garage, was blinking 12:01. But none of them were right. It wasn't just a power outage. The weird part is the stove had a battery backup. It shouldn't have reset like that. And my old watch, which I keep in a drawer by the entryway, was dead too. It had a fresh battery. I just changed it that week. Kip finally got up and started pacing in circles by the back door, not whining, just low growls. He'd stop and sniff at the door like someone was standing on the other side. Then he'd back up, hackles up, and walk away. Repeat, over and over. I opened the back door, real slow, nothing there. No animals, no movement. The woods were pitch black, but I could tell the air was different. Cooler, somehow. Like it had dropped 5 degrees since we'd gone to bed. The kind of cold that feels dry and still like winter air, even though it wasn't winter. Mara came up behind me and put her hand on my shoulder. Neither of us said anything. That's when Kip bolted out into the yard. Full sprint, tail down, making a wide loop like he was chasing something, but there was nothing there. He ran halfway to the tree line, then stopped hard and just stood there, dead still, facing the woods. He didn't bark. We called him. Loud. He didn't budge. I had to walk out there and snap my fingers in front of his face to get him to look at me. His eyes were wide, ears flat. When I touched his collar, he flinched like I'd shocked him. He followed me back to the house, but kept stopping to look behind us. No tail wag, no interest in sniffing the grass like usual, just this locked-on stare at the woods. We double-checked all the doors and windows, turned off the lights, and tried to go back to sleep. Neither of us could. I think I finally dozed off around 4. Mara stayed up the whole time, sitting on the edge of the bed, listening. In the morning, our phone still wouldn't turn on. Mine had been on the charger all night, hers too. We had to use the landline in the kitchen to call work and let them know we'd be late. The cable box was dead. The router wasn't even broadcasting. Our desktop wouldn't boot, just made this quiet clicking noise when I tried. Weirdest of all, the old flip phone we keep in the junk drawer for emergencies, you know. That was dead too. It wasn't plugged in, just sitting there. Battery had been full the week before. Nothing. Mara noticed the plants in the kitchen looked strange. The big pothouse by the window had these thin white spots along the edges of the leaves like frostburn. The cactus on the windowsill looked slightly wilted, which I'd never seen before. It survived 3 moves and years of neglect. Kip wouldn't go near the back door the whole day. Every time we walked by, he'd take a wide arc around the kitchen table, tail tucked. Even when we tried to coax him out for a walk, he'd pull toward the front yard only, wouldn't step near the back gate. By the afternoon, power was working fine, but nothing with a battery would hold charge. I borrowed a neighbor's phone to make some calls. Duke Energy hadn't had any outages reported on our street. No storms, no scheduled work, nothing. We checked the doorbell camera footage later that night. It had reset too, but the internal storage had saved one last clip, a few seconds before it died. The timestamp was messed up and the footage was grainy, but you could make out the flash. The whole yard lit up white, not blue like lightning, more sterile, almost like a camera flash but much brighter. It looked like it came from directly above the house. That was it. Then, static. We didn't talk about it with anyone for a while, not even close friends. It just felt too weird to explain without sounding nuts. A few days later, Mara noticed something on her laptop charger, this faint discoloration on the metal prongs, like they'd been burned, just slightly. You wouldn't notice unless you were really looking. The plastic around them was intact, but the metal was darkened. Same thing on the phone chargers. Not melted, just off, like they'd all been exposed to some kind of intense surge or heat. But the breakers in the house were fine. Nothing had flipped. I started sleeping lighter after that, waking up at odd hours. Kip would do it too. We'd both jolt up around 3 or 4 a.m. and just lie there staring into the dark. No barking, just this stillness, like the whole house was holding its breath. It passed, eventually. A few weeks later, things mostly felt normal again. Electronics started working, though we replaced a lot of them. The clocks never did go back to normal. Every one we reset would end up drifting. Not fast or slow, just off by a minute or two every few days, like they were syncing to something else. We bought a new microwave and a new router. Mara switched to an analog watch. I got rid of the smart plugs. Kip still won't go near the back fence. I was driving home late one Friday night on this stretch of highway that runs through the foothills outside of Salem, Oregon. It's the kind of road that's mostly empty at night, just long, winding asphalt through trees and some open fields, and it's usually quiet, except for the occasional truck or late-night commuter like me. That night, it was clear and cool, early spring with a little chill in the air but no wind. I'd just gotten off a double shift at the diner where I work, and I was tired, looking forward to crashing once I got home. I was about halfway through the drive, maybe 10 miles out of town, when I noticed something weird up ahead. At first, it looked like a plane was hovering right over the highway. I don't mean flying low or anything normal. It was just there, completely still, hanging maybe 50 or 60 feet off the ground. No lights blinking, no sound, nothing. Just a dark shape against the clear night sky. I slowed down and blinked a few times, thinking maybe it was some kind of crane or a weird drone or even a helicopter, but the way it just hovered without any noise threw me off. There was no blinking light on it at all, which is strange for anything flying over a road. As I got closer, I saw it start to rotate slowly, like it was turning around an invisible axis. The shape was kind of triangular, but nothing I recognized from any aircraft I'd ever seen. The edges were smooth, and it didn't look like it had wings or rotors. just this silent, dark mass that was moving slowly in place. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling a little uneasy. My headlights didn't seem to shine on it properly. The surface was almost absorbing the light. I kept watching it in my rearview mirror as I passed underneath. It didn't move forward or sideways, just rotated slowly, completely silent. I couldn't see any support, no cables, no poles, no engines. I wasn't the only one who saw it. A few weeks later, I found a local online forum where people were talking about the same thing. Drivers reported seeing this dark triangular shape hovering in the exact same spot along the highway, usually between 10:30 and midnight. Everyone described it the same way: silent, no blinking lights, slow rotation, no visible means of support. A couple of people said their phones lost signal or their GPS acted weird around that stretch of road. I didn't notice that myself, but I didn't check either. I was just glad to get home. The next time I drove that way, I tried to leave later, hoping to see it again or at least figure out what it was. I got there around 11:15 p.m., and for a while, nothing, just the quiet road, the smell of pine, and my headlights cutting through the dark. Then, out of nowhere, the same dark shape appeared, hovering over the same spot, rotating slowly. I slowed down like last time, watching carefully, but I swear, my radio started to cut out, like static crackling in and out. The signal was spotty for a few seconds, then came back. The thing didn't move or make a sound. I thought about stopping and getting out of the car, but something made me stay put. I kept my eyes on it as I drove past again, but by the time I was 10 miles down the road, it was gone. I told a coworker about it, but he just laughed it off, said I was probably tired or imagining things. Another driver I talked to said they saw the same thing about a month earlier, but thought it was a weather balloon or a military test. That made me wonder if it was some secret government stuff, but I'd never seen a balloon just sit still and rotate like that, and no noise doesn't add up. The weirdest part was how calm it felt. Not like you'd expect, right? You'd think seeing something like that would freak you out, but I was just quiet. Like the thing didn't want me to be scared or anything. Just there, watching. After a few weeks, I stopped driving that route late at night. I figured it was better not to mess with whatever that was. One night, I was coming back from a friend's place, about 2 a.m., and I noticed headlights behind me. Thought it was someone just catching up, but as I glanced in my mirror, the car behind me slowed down too, then stopped on the shoulder. I pulled over to see if they needed help or something. The driver was a woman named Laura, a local from down the road. She told me she'd seen the same dark shape hovering over the highway that night and had been too creeped out to drive past it. We talked for a bit, and she said she felt like the thing was watching her too, like it was waiting. Neither of us could explain what it was or why it just sat there spinning slowly. The next morning, I went back out with my phone camera, hoping to catch something. But no matter how many times I passed that spot during the day, the shape never appeared. It was like it only showed up at night, in the dark. I never saw it again after that last sighting, but every time I drive that highway at night now, I glance up, half expecting to see it hovering silently, rotating, waiting. No flashing lights, no noise, just there, watching. I woke up standing in my backyard, barefoot on the cold grass, staring up at the sky. The first thing I noticed was a ringing in my ears, like when you've been at a concert or your headphones blast too loud. It wasn't loud, just this steady, high-pitched tone that seemed to fill my head. I blinked a few times, trying to get my bearings, but everything felt foggy, like I'd just been pulled out of a deep sleep. I didn't remember going outside. The last thing I could recall was being in bed, probably around midnight. I wasn't even fully sure what time it was now. The sky was dark, but there was this strange, muted glow overhead, like the whole neighborhood was under a thick haze. I looked down at my feet. They were wet and a little muddy, and the grass was damp with dew. I live in a suburban neighborhood, so it's not like I have a forest or anything out back, just a small patch of grass and a wooden fence. The air was cool and smelled faintly of rain, even though the forecast didn't call for any. I had no idea how I'd gotten out here. I checked my hands and clothes for cuts or scratches, thinking maybe I'd fallen or something, but there was nothing. My shirt was wrinkled and untucked, and my jeans had some dirt smudges, but no real damage. I didn't feel hurt or out of breath, just kind of blank. The ringing didn't stop. It was still there, this constant high tone inside my head, and I noticed my heartbeat was a little louder than normal. I stepped toward the back door, and the cold grass squished under my feet. Every step felt strange, like I was moving through a dream. I opened the door and stepped inside. The ringing started to fade the moment I crossed the threshold. It wasn't instant, but slow, like a volume knob turning down. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a second, trying to shake off the weird feeling. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were steady but felt strange, like they didn't quite belong to me. I tried to remember what happened before I ended up outside, but my mind was blank, like a blank screen. I checked my phone for the time. It was 2:37 a.m. I had no messages, no missed calls. The screen was dim, but I noticed something odd. The battery had dropped from around 60% when I went to bed to just 12% now. I was pretty sure I hadn't used it at all during the night. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to focus. The ringing was gone, but I felt a lingering pressure behind my eyes. I thought about trying to go back to bed, but part of me was restless, like I needed to figure out what had just happened. I decided to check the backyard again, but this time with shoes and a flashlight. I wanted to see if there was anything out there that could explain the ringing or how I got out. Outside, the grass looked normal, except for a small circle near the fence where the dew was missing. The ground was dry there, even though the rest of the lawn was wet. It wasn't muddy or crushed, just dry and oddly clean, like someone had wiped it down. I scanned the sky with my flashlight, but there was nothing except a thick layer of fog or haze that blurred the streetlights in the distance. No stars, no moon. That's when I noticed it, a faint glow beyond the fence line off in the woods behind the houses. It was pale and steady, not like a flashlight or a car. Just this soft, unmoving light that didn't flicker or change. I thought maybe it was a street lamp or a neighbor's porch light, but it felt too far away and too low to be any of those. And I knew every house around here pretty well. The ringing came back for a moment, just a faint buzz, but it stopped again as soon as I turned my head away from the light. I stood there for a few minutes, watching it, feeling this weird mix of calm and unease. I wanted to call someone, but I wasn't sure what I'd say. Eventually, I went back inside. The moment I stepped through the door, the light outside blinked off, disappearing as quietly as it had come. The next day, I asked my neighbor if they had seen anything weird last night, but they said no. Everything was normal. The yard looked fine, and nothing unusual was reported. I checked the backyard again during daylight. That dry patch was still there. It looked like a perfect circle, maybe 10 feet across, with the grass stiff and pale. I've sleptwalked a few times before, but never anything like this. Never out into the backyard in the middle of the night, with no memory of moving, and definitely never with ringing in my ears or strange lights hovering just beyond the fence. I haven't told many people about it, mostly because I don't really understand what happened. It wasn't scary like a nightmare, but it wasn't normal either. Sometimes when it's quiet and I'm lying in bed, I can still hear that faint ringing for a moment, like a reminder that whatever was out there is still just beyond my reach. I was driving back from my brother's place in Tampa. It was late, around 11:45 at night, and I'd only stayed that long because he kept pouring more bourbon and talking about some show he was into. I told him I was fine to drive, which I was. I'd only had one drink in the first hour, and besides, the roads were dry and empty, and I'd driven that route 100 times. I took I-275 south, then cut over toward St. Pete on Gandy. Nothing special. Traffic was thin, mostly quiet. My dog, Booker, was in the back seat of the Tacoma, passed out in his little travel bed. He always conked out as soon as we hit 50 miles per hour. The dash cam I have is this little Garmin model. Not top of the line, but decent. I keep it running because I do a lot of deliveries during the week, and there have been enough close calls that I'd rather have footage than try to argue with somebody's insurance. I remember passing the bridge, that long, lit-up stretch over the bay. The lights there are bright, almost too bright, but it's better than pitch dark water on both sides. I had a podcast on. Something true crime, I think. Then the road ahead dipped down slightly near that weird, half-abandoned rest stop, and everything went off. It didn't go dark, not at first. The street lights were still on, and the white lines on the road were clear. But something shifted. I noticed the silence first. The podcast cut out. I figured it was my phone disconnecting from Bluetooth. Happens sometimes when I hit dead zones. But then I realized the engine sounded different. Muted. Like I was driving underwater. I glanced at the speedometer, still around 62. RPM's normal. No lights on the dash. I turned the volume knob on the console. Nothing changed. Then everything went black. I don't mean outside. I mean the whole windshield. Total black. No transition. Just 1 second I was driving under lights, and the next it was like someone had thrown a tarp over the truck. I tapped the brakes, but didn't slam them. I didn't want someone behind me rear-ending me if it was just my headlights that cut out. But that wasn't it. The headlights were still on, according to the dash. It just didn't show anything. No road, no signs, no other cars. It lasted maybe 4 or 5 seconds. I counted out loud, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, trying to stay calm. I didn't steer or move the wheel. The truck didn't shake or bump like it had gone off-road. I kept waiting to see the glow of another set of headlights or a mile marker. Then, just like that, everything came back. Lights, road, sound. The podcast was still off, but I could hear the engine again and the rush of wind through the slightly cracked window. Booker stood up in the back seat and started whining. He doesn't usually do that unless he needs to pee. I reached back to scratch behind his ears, told him we were almost home. My heart was going pretty hard. I glanced at the clock on the dash, 12:04. That caught me off guard. The bridge hadn't taken that long to cross. I looked at my watch. It said 11:59. I pulled off at the next gas station, some old Sunoco with flickering overheads and no other cars in the lot. I checked the phone, 12:05. My watch was 5 minutes behind. It's a cheap Casio, yeah, but it never does that. It's not a smartwatch or anything fancy, but I'd synced it earlier that day before heading out. It doesn't drift like that. Booker jumped out and immediately started sniffing the grass near the dumpster, then barked once toward the tree line. I didn't see anything, just some oaks and palmettos past the edge of the lot. I got back in the truck, heart still doing that fluttery thing like I'd almost crashed, and decided I'd check the dash cam footage when I got home. I figured maybe the camera would show what happened, or if I'd swerved, or I don't know. Maybe it would show something I hadn't seen. I got home, parked in the driveway, walked Booker, poured a glass of water, and sat down at my computer with the dash cam card. I scrubbed through the footage. Everything looked normal. Me leaving my brother's place, the route through the neighborhoods, the highway ramp, the bridge. Then there's a part where I can hear myself humming along with the podcast music right as I pass the rest stop. The date and timestamp on the corner jumps straight from 11:56:43 to 12:1:55. No fade out, no transition. Just 5 minutes missing. And the screen goes completely black for about 5 seconds. It's not corrupted, it's not static, it's pure black. No sound, no motion blur, no dashboard reflection, just a solid black rectangle like the lens cap was on, except I was driving. Then it cuts back in, and I'm still on the road, humming again, like I didn't notice anything. Except I know I did. I remember counting the seconds out loud. That part's not in the audio. It jumps from me humming to me clearing my throat. I sat there in my kitchen for a while, watching that stretch of footage over and over. I look at the GPS data embedded in the file. The route is continuous. The coordinates make sense. Just a straight shot across Gandhi. I uploaded the video to a private folder and sent a copy to my brother. He called me 2 hours later and just said, "What the hell is this?" I didn't have an answer. I checked the truck in the morning. No signs of damage, no dirt or debris. Tires were fine. Booker wouldn't get in the back seat at first. He just circled it, sniffing the wheel wells. Eventually, I coaxed him up with a treat, but he kept staring out the rear window the whole drive to the store, ears flat. That stretch of road still feels weird. I've driven it twice since then, once during the day, once at night. Nothing strange happened either time. But both times, when I passed the rest stop, I got this tight feeling in my chest, like I was waiting to hit something I couldn't see. And I've noticed my watch runs 5 minutes slow now. No matter how many times I reset it, it syncs, it holds for a day or two, then drifts back again. Always to 5 minutes behind. I bought a new one last week, different brand, digital, same thing. After a day and a half, it shifted 5 minutes slow. I woke up that morning with a pounding headache and my nose dripping blood onto the pillow. At first, I thought maybe I'd hit my head in my sleep or something, but when I sat up and wiped at my face, I noticed something else. On my right shoulder, just where my shirt had been riding up, there were these weird reddish marks. They looked like burns, but not the usual kind, more like a pattern, like someone had pressed a stencil or a stamp against my skin. It was made up of a bunch of tiny triangles and lines, kind of like those old geometric puzzles you see in design books or tattoos, but I'd never seen anything like it on a person. I didn't remember anything strange before I went to bed. I'd fallen asleep like usual in my room with my dog Juno curled up at the foot of the bed. Nothing out of the ordinary. The night had been quiet, except maybe for some distant thunder, but I wasn't sure. I tried to stand but got lightheaded fast. The headache was sharp, and the blood from my nose kept coming in slow drips. I called out for my mom, who came in a few minutes later, clearly worried. "Where did you hit yourself?" she asked, pulling back my shirt to see the marks. "I didn't hit anything. I don't know what this is," I said, touching the strange pattern lightly. It felt warm, but not painful. It didn't look like a rash, and there was no swelling or blistering. She cleaned me up and took me to the urgent care clinic nearby. The doctor examined me thoroughly. Nosebleed, dehydration maybe, but nothing that explained the marks on my shoulder. They ran some scans and blood tests, but everything came back normal. No burns, no skin damage visible on the scans, nothing. That's what freaked me out the most. The pattern was right there on my skin, but the machines showed nothing, like the marks were just on the surface, or maybe my skin was playing tricks. The doctor said it might be an allergic reaction or something minor that would go away, but the nosebleed combined with the marks didn't make much sense. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal at school, but all I could think about was that shoulder. By evening, the redness had started fading, and by the next morning, it was almost gone, like it never happened. I checked the mirror carefully, looking for any trace of the geometric shapes, but there was nothing, just my regular skin, pale from not sleeping well. At first I thought maybe it was some kind of weird allergic reaction to detergent or a bug bite, but no one else in the house was affected, and I hadn't changed anything recently. That night I kept Juno close, and whenever I looked at my shoulder, I felt this weird chill. It wasn't fear exactly, more like confusion. Like my body had done something strange while I wasn't paying attention. I started paying attention to little things after that. Like how sometimes when I was alone in my room, I'd hear soft tapping noises, like someone knocking lightly on the walls. But when I checked, no one was there. Or how my phone would occasionally glitch, freezing on strange static patterns for a few seconds before coming back to normal. At school, some kids made jokes about me having secret symbols, or alien tattoos, which made me roll my eyes, but inside I wondered if maybe they were onto something, or if I was just losing it. I told my parents, but they mostly chalked it up to stress. I had been having trouble sleeping and focusing lately, but that didn't explain the nosebleed or the marks. One night a week later, I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when Juno suddenly jumped up. Ears perked, staring at the corner of my room near the window. The air felt colder there, like a draft, even though the window was shut tight. The lights flickered briefly, and then the tapping started again. I didn't see anything, but my skin crawled. I tried to shake it off as nerves and went back to sleep. The next morning, I noticed a faint scar in the shape of one of those triangles on my shoulder. It was barely visible, like a faint scratch. When I showed my mom, she didn't notice it at first, but when she looked closer, she got this worried look on her face. We went back to the doctor, who said the skin was healing normally, but still no explanation for the pattern or why it appeared in the first place. The whole thing stuck with me for months. The nosebleed never came back, and the scars faded completely after a few weeks. But the memories of that night, the marks, the tapping, the cold spot, felt like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Sometimes when I'm alone in my room and the light is just right, I swear I can feel that cold draft near the window again, and if I look closely, shadows seem to move just a little too fast in the corner of my vision. I don't know what it means or if anyone else has experienced something like this, but it changed how I see things. Sometimes the world hides things just beyond what we can explain, and maybe that's okay. That's all I've got. Just a nosebleed, some strange marks, and a few nights that felt off. I was doing my usual rounds out near Coldwater Marsh, one of those places most people don't think twice about unless they're looking to fish or birdwatch. It's a quiet patch of wetlands about 20 miles northeast of the park headquarters, mostly dense reeds, muddy water, and the occasional dirt trail that snakes through the brush. I was alone that morning. My partner Kyle had the day off, and it was foggy, thick enough that I could barely see more than a few feet ahead. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. My job was mostly checking traps, making sure the boundaries were clear, and keeping an eye on poachers or lost hikers. The fog made everything feel slower, quieter, like the world had muted itself. I'd parked my truck on the dirt road near the marsh edge around 7:30 a.m. and had been walking the perimeter for a couple of hours. My dog, Luna, was with me, a big mutt with a brindle coat and way too much energy for early mornings. She'd been sniffing around like usual, poking her nose into every puddle and root she could find. Then, about halfway through the second loop, something caught my eye. Muddy prints, leading right off the trail and straight into the marsh grass. I knelt down to get a closer look. The footprints were definitely human in shape, 5 toes, a clear arch, but they were enormous, at least twice the size of a normal adult male's prints. I swear the sole was nearly a foot long. I called Luna back and stood up, brushing mud off my pants. The prints went in a line, spaced out evenly, like someone was walking slowly and deliberately. The thing was, they stopped abruptly about 15 feet into the marsh itself. No sign of disturbance beyond that point. No way through the thick reeds and soggy muck. It was like the person, or whatever it was, had just vanished. I took out my phone to snap some pictures, but fog was messing with the camera focus. The images were grainy and washed out. Still, I sent a couple to the park office for records with a quick note. I figured maybe it was some local fisherman or someone clumsy who'd wandered in, but the size of the prints threw me off. No one in this part of the county was that big, and the prints were fresh enough that they couldn't be from weeks ago. Luna started growling low in her throat, looking toward the marsh where the prints ended. I tried to ignore it and called her off, but she kept staring, stiff-legged and tense. I wanted to move on, tell myself it was just a weird anomaly. But something about the quiet there made my skin crawl. The fog seemed thicker near the marsh, like it was swallowing up sound and light. I stood still for a minute, and I swear I heard the faintest splash way off to my left, maybe 50 yards into the reeds. But when I looked, there was nothing. Just a still patch of water and waving grasses. I started walking back toward the truck, keeping Luna close. My boots sank into the mud with every step, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling eyes on me. Nothing visible, but that feeling stayed, like I wasn't alone. By the time I got back, the sun had burned off some of the fog, but the marsh still looked like a ghost town. The air smelled damp and heavy. I told Kyle about the footprints later, and he joked that maybe Bigfoot had taken a day off and wandered through. I laughed it off too, but deep down I wasn't sure what else to say. The next day, I went back with a small crew to look for more tracks or any other signs. We found nothing. The marsh was quiet. The water still, no prints or broken branches beyond what I'd seen. That night at home, Luna wouldn't stop pacing by the back door. She stared out into the dark like something was waiting there, just beyond the edge of the yard. I checked the security cameras. Nothing. No people, no animals. A few days later, I was going through the photos again, zooming in on the footprints. I noticed something weird I hadn't seen before. a faint second set of smaller prints inside the larger ones, almost like someone was stepping directly into those giant footprints. But when I looked closer, the smaller prints were off. The toes were too long and thin, like they belonged to something else entirely. I tried showing the pictures to some local wildlife experts and even the county sheriff, but no one had a good explanation. They said maybe an animal had messed with the prints or something, but none of it fit right. I stopped going near Coldwater Marsh for a while after that. The fog, the quiet, those prints all felt like pieces of something I couldn't put together. Last week, Luna started barking at the window again, the same tense, locked-on kind of bark. When I looked outside, there was nothing but the empty yard and a low mist rolling in. I swear, for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move just beyond the trees. I don't know what I saw out there, or what made those prints in the mud, but whatever it wasn't human, and it didn't leave. I was on the night shift at the Cedar Ridge Observatory, a small but pretty important research station nestled up in the Cascades. My job was mostly monitoring the telescopes, checking the data streams, and making sure everything ran smoothly while the big brains slept. It was a quiet gig, mostly paperwork and occasional troubleshooting, perfect for someone who likes peace and hates crowds. The place sits on a ridge, miles from the nearest town, with nothing but trees and sky around. The nights out there are always dark, the kind of dark that lets you see every star in the sky if it's clear. This one night, the sky was crystal clear, no clouds, no haze. I remember that because it was unusual for spring, and the astronomers were excited about a particular set of observations. We had 4 telescopes online, each pointed at different parts of the sky. I was keeping an eye on the logs, running diagnostics, and jotting down notes when something odd happened. At around 1:15 a.m., the signal from Telescope 3 just dropped. No warning, no error messages, nothing. The monitor went blank like the feed was cut off. I hit the reset button and tried to reconnect, but nothing worked. The connection just wasn't there. What creeped me out more was the last image captured before the blackout. It showed this blurry, shifting shape covering nearly half of the field of view, blotting out the stars. The blur was smeared like something moving really fast right in front of the lens. But there shouldn't have been anything near the telescope physically. It's housed in a locked dome, and the dome's security alarm was silent. I double-checked the security footage for the last 2 hours. No one approached the building, no weird shadows, no animals messing with the equipment. Everything was normal. The cameras caught the usual raccoons scurrying by hours before, but nothing near the dome at the time the signal dropped. I called my coworker, Dana, who was in the next building. She wasn't on shift, but lives in the small cabin on the property and sometimes drops in at night. She said she didn't hear or see anything unusual. The place was too quiet. I sat back in my chair, staring at the frozen screen. I felt this chill creeping up my spine, even though the room was warm. I tried to shake it off. Then the power flickered, just for a second, enough to make all the monitors blink off and on. Nothing else seemed affected, just the observatory's equipment. I went outside for some fresh air. The night was so still, it felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. I looked up. The stars were bright, endless, but in one patch above the ridge, they seemed slightly dimmer, like a faint shadow crossing the sky. I blinked, and it was gone. Jasper, my border collie mix, who was resting in the kennel nearby, perked his ears and started growling low and quiet. He's usually calm at night, but something unsettled him. I walked down the path to check the power box. Everything looked normal. No blown fuses, no unusual readings. The blinking stopped. Back inside, I tried reconnecting to Telescope 3 again. The feed remained dead. Then, the strange thing happened. My phone buzzed with a notification, an incoming text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was just a single word. Look. I checked outside again. The forest was still. Jasper was quiet now, but watching me closely. I didn't reply. I turned on the TV, tried to distract myself. Nothing on the news or weather report mentioned anything strange. Later at 3 a.m., I heard a soft hum coming from the direction of Telescope 3's dome. Like a low vibration, almost mechanical, but steady and constant. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out, Jasper following. The dome was locked tight. No way anyone got in. The hum stopped when I got close. I checked the camera feed one last time and noticed the blurry shape on the last image wasn't random motion. It had a shape, elongated, almost organic, like a shadow cast by something moving just out of focus. I spent the rest of the night sitting there, half watching the sky, half watching the screens. No more blurs, no more signals lost, but the feeling lingered, like something had brushed past the edge of everything I knew. I packed up at dawn and drove home through the empty mountain roads. Jasper was quiet in the back seat. The next day, the observatory replaced the telescope's camera, but they never found what caused the blackout. I still don't know what the blur was, or why the power flickered, or why I got that text. But every time I look up at the stars now, a part of me wonders what else is out there, just out of sight. I worked night security at a manufacturing plant in North Carolina, about 20 minutes outside Asheville. Middle of nowhere, really. The plant backed up to a big stretch of undeveloped woodland, state-owned, I think. And the whole compound was fenced in, surrounded by pine and gravel and not much else. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and it was mostly quiet. We had a skeleton crew on the floor overnight, maybe 5 guys in the whole building. I was the only guard on duty. There were 16 cameras I was supposed to monitor from the office. Most of them were focused on loading docks, doors, parking lots, standard stuff. We didn't get much trouble, just the occasional raccoon setting off a motion alert or someone forgetting their badge. One camera covered the East Service Road, the narrow access lane that looped behind the building toward the woods. That feed, camera 12, was the only one that faced directly out toward the tree line, with a big patch of sky above it. The first time I noticed anything weird was in February, cold and clear that night. I remember I was halfway through a cup of instant ramen, bored out of my mind, when the camera feed flickered. It wasn't a full glitch, more like a shimmer, like heat haze or something underwater, only on that one feed. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, then it snapped back to normal. I rewound the footage, but the recording skipped over the shimmer entirely. Just cut from 236.59 to 237.02, like nothing happened. Thought it might have been a tech hiccup. We had spotty signal on a few of the older cameras, especially when it got cold. But the next night it happened again. Same camera, same exact time, 2:37 a.m. Another quick flicker, a kind of warped ripple through the background sky behind the tree line. Then back to normal. I started watching for it after that. Every single night, without fail, camera 12 glitched at exactly 2:37. Always the same shimmer in the same spot, high in the sky, near the upper right of the frame. Sometimes it lasted just a second. Other nights it stretched to 3 or 4. Never showed up in the recordings, just skipped that time entirely, like the DVR didn't want to acknowledge it. I didn't tell anyone at first. Who would care? Tech acts up, right? But it kept happening. Weeks passed and it never missed a night. The distortion stayed in the same part of the sky, too, never shifted left or right, never got closer or farther, just shimmered, then vanished. One night I stepped outside to see if I could catch it in person. Brought my thermos with me, walked out past the loading dock around 2:30. There was a thin frost on the gravel. I stood behind the fence and looked up at the trees, waiting. At 2:37, I felt something. I didn't see anything, not really. The stars stayed put. The sky looked normal, but there was this faint pressure in the air, like a low-frequency hum you couldn't hear, only feel. My chest tightened. The hair on my arms stood up. It wasn't cold. It was something else. Like the atmosphere changed for a second, like everything went off balance. Then it passed. Just like that. I went back inside and checked the feed. Sure enough, the camera had shimmered again. I started keeping a log after that. Dates, times, weather conditions. Tried to matter if it was clear, cloudy, raining, windy. Camera 12 always glitched at 2:37. Then one night in March, the shimmer changed. Instead of the usual warping ripple, the sky behind the trees bulged, like something invisible pushed out from behind the feed, distorting the image. Only for a second, but it was enough to make me lean closer. I thought maybe the camera had finally cracked or water got inside the lens. I paused the live feed and zoomed in. There was a shape, barely visible, like a smear of light bending around something solid, right in the middle of that bulge. I couldn't describe it exactly. It wasn't round, but not angular either. It had no clear edges. Just this suggestion of presence, right where the shimmer always happened. The moment I let go of the zoom button, the feed cut out entirely. Camera 12 went black. I rebooted the system, but it didn't come back until 2:41. When it did, the view was normal again. The next night, the camera worked fine. At 2:37, the shimmer returned, back to the usual warping. The shape didn't show up again. Not for a while. About a week later, I brought a small set of binoculars from home. Nothing fancy. I figured if the distortion lined up with something in the real sky, maybe I'd catch it. Around 2:30, I stepped outside again and stood behind the east lot. Brought a laser pointer with me too. Not to do anything with, just to mark the spot for myself. At 2:37, I aimed the binoculars at the same patch of sky and waited. That's when I noticed the silence. No wind. No crickets. No distant truck hum from the highway. Just absolute stillness. Then the pressure came again, stronger this time. My vision through the binoculars wobbled for a second, like I was looking through thick glass. I felt lightheaded, dizzy, like I'd stood up too fast. Something flickered past the stars. I don't know how else to say it. A flash of not sky, just a split second of something darker, more textured. Then it was gone. I lowered the binoculars and just stood there. I didn't go back inside right away. After that, things started to feel different in the office. Not wrong, exactly, just watched. Like there was something just outside the edges of the camera feeds, waiting for 2:37 tick over. One night, I tried calling the security company's tech team to ask about replacing camera 12. I didn't say why, just that the feed kept glitching. The guy on the phone checked the logs and said he didn't see any errors. According to their system, the feed had been stable for months. I asked if the system ever skipped over timestamps. He said no. It wasn't designed that way. I hung up. A few nights later, something new happened. I was pouring coffee when I heard a click from the monitor bank. Not a glitch, an actual mechanical sound like someone pressed a button. I turned and saw camera 12 was no longer showing live footage. It had switched to playback mode 2:37 a.m. from earlier that night. Only this time, there was footage. No shimmer, no glitch, just a frozen frame of the trees and something in the sky above them. That same vague shape I'd seen before. Clearer now. Almost translucent, like a jellyfish but without tentacles. Hovering, motionless, high above the tree line. It didn't move. It just hung there. Then the screen flicked back to live view on its own. I didn't touch anything. That was the last time I saw anything that clear. After that, the shimmer kept happening, but the shape never came back. At least not on camera. One night, near the end of March, I went outside one last time around 2:35. I stood in the same spot behind the fence and looked up at the same patch of sky. At 2:37, I felt the pressure again. And this time, I heard something. Not a hum, not a voice. Just this faint clicking like stone tapping on metal. It came from above, steady and slow. 5 clicks, then silence. I backed away and went inside. I didn't go out there again after that. The shimmer still showed up on camera 12, same time, same spot, every night. I stopped watching it, started turning the monitor off just before 2:37. I didn't quit the job or move away or anything like that, but I stopped asking questions. It never glitched on any other camera. Never happened during the day. Only there. Only then. Only that sky. We were heading back from fishing out near Lake Meredith, me, Tessa, and my cousin Wyatt. It was late, somewhere past 11, and we'd taken the old service road instead of the highway, which was probably stupid, but we were in Wyatt's truck, and he liked cutting through that stretch for the view, even though it's just brush, dirt, and wind turbines. We didn't see another car for miles, just dry, flat land and those tall white turbines spinning slow in the dark. The sky was clear, no moon, but you could see every star. It was one of those weirdly warm spring nights, like it should have been cold, but the air felt heavy and still. No wind at all. We were maybe 15 minutes from getting back to town when we saw the car. It was a gray sedan, parked half in the road and half on the shoulder, maybe 30 yards ahead. Headlights were on. Driver's door hanging wide open. Engine running, we could hear it as we got closer, Zard, this soft, uneven hum that didn't sound right. Wyatt slowed down and we just sort of stared at it. No one inside, no movement. He pulled over a few feet back from it and left his truck running. None of us got out at first. We were just quiet. Then Tessa said, "That's weird," and I remember her voice sounded flat. Not scared exactly, just off. I got out first, walked up slow, hands in my hoodie pocket. I think part of me expected someone to pop out, maybe a guy peeing in the bushes or someone changing a flat, but there weren't any bushes, and the tires were fine. I leaned in and looked around the interior. Purse on the passenger seat, phone in the cup holder, keys still in the ignition. The headlights were shining out into the field beside the road, and that's when I saw it. Right where the beams hit, maybe 30 feet ahead, was a perfect circle of scorched grass. Not trampled, not burned like from a fire, just blackened. Charred all the way through, but nothing around it was touched. Just this flat, round patch about the size of a backyard pool, maybe 15 feet across. Wyatt came up behind me and said, "That ain't a campfire." And he was right. There was no debris, no tire tracks near it, no sign of anything burning its way in or out. And the weirdest part, the grass wasn't flattened. It was still standing up, just dead, black and brittle like it had been cooked straight through. Tessa stayed in the truck. She rolled the window down and asked if we should call it in. I said, yeah, maybe. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the car and the patch in the same frame. But when I opened the gallery to check, it was just black. Like the lens cap had been on, even though it obviously wasn't. I tried again. Same thing, just pure black squares. Not blurry, not overexposed, just nothing. I didn't say anything right then. I just stuck the phone back in my pocket. Wyatt circled the sedan, looking for signs of damage. There weren't any. The rear passenger door had a small smear of mud on it, like someone brushed past in a hurry. That was it. The grass along the edge of the field hadn't been stepped on either. No trail, no prints. He popped his head into the driver's side and looked around. "It's in park," he said. "Full tank. Windows down in the back, no wallet." I asked if it could have been stolen and ditched. He just gave me a look like, stolen and ditched in the middle of nowhere with the lights on and the keys still in it? Didn't add up. We stood there for a bit, not saying much, just listening. The air felt wrong, like it was too quiet. No bugs, no wind, just that low hum of the engine and the turbines turning way off in the distance. Then something buzzed, Wyatt's phone. He checked it and frowned. "No service," he said, and held it up like that'd change anything. I looked at mine. Same. No bars, which didn't make sense because we were close enough to the wind farm that there were usually 3 towers in range. I'd streamed YouTube in that area before. Wyatt said we should drive into town and report it. Let the sheriff's office handle it. I agreed. But then he turned to get back in the truck and froze. What the hell? I looked. Tessa was gone. Passenger door still shut, window still down. Her seat was empty. I took off running, yelled her name. No answer. I ran around the side of the truck, half expecting her to be crouched behind it messing with us. But she wasn't there. Driver's side door still shut too. The grass on the shoulder undisturbed. It couldn't have been more than 10 seconds since we saw her last. She couldn't have gotten far. There was nothing to hide behind anyway, just flat land and sky and that burnt circle out in the field. Wyatt shouted and took off toward it. I followed. We got to the edge and stopped. It was cold near the patch. Not like a breeze, just colder. The air dropped 10 degrees. You could feel it in your teeth. The soil crunched under our boots like it had been through a fire, but there was no ash. Nothing drifting or smoldering. Just dry blackness. We circled the edge. No tracks in or out. No sound except our breathing. Then we heard the truck horn. We spun around, headlights flashed. Tessa was back in the truck, sitting in the front seat, eyes wide. She looked pale. Wyatt sprinted back, calling her name. I was right behind him. When we got there, she was shaking. Said she didn't remember leaving the truck. 1 second she was watching us by the sedan. The next, she was sitting in the seat, alone. She swore she hadn't moved. But her boots were dusty like she'd been walking through the field, and there was a smudge of soot on the back of her jacket. We didn't ask more questions. We just left. We drove straight to the sheriff's office and reported the car, gave the location, told them it looked abandoned, left out the rest. Next morning, we called to follow up. The deputy said they'd found the vehicle, but nothing unusual. Just a stalled sedan, engine cold, no sign of the owner. towed it to impound. No mention of the scorched grass. No report of the door being open. I asked if they found a purse or phone inside. They said no. Clean interior. Nothing of note. I checked my phone again later that day. The pictures I'd taken were gone. Not even black squares anymore. Just missing. Like they never existed. The only trace was a blank spot in my camera roll where the thumbnails skipped a few seconds. We didn't talk about it again after that. Not really. Tessa won't go near that part of the county anymore. Wyatt sold the truck a few months later, claimed it had electrical issues, but I never saw any. I still think about that car. The way the engine sounded like it was straining. The way the grass was just dead in a perfect circle. I don't have a word for what we saw. All I know is we weren't supposed to be there. I was up in the Adirondacks last October, trying to get one last good hike in before the snow came. Took a week off work, rented this little cabin near Stillwater Reservoir. Nothing fancy, wood stove, no Wi-Fi, no cell signal unless I hiked up the ridge out back. That was kind of the point. I needed a break from everything. I brought my dog, Rook, a gangly black and white mutt I got from a rescue in Albany. He's usually nervous in new places, but he loves the woods. It happened on my third day out there. Weather had turned weird. Warm for the season, but humid, like late August, not mid-fall. The leaves were mostly down, so the trail was slippery in places. I decided to take the side loop off Red Horse Trail, one that followed an old logging road. It wasn't on the main map, but the cabin owner had pointed it out to me, said it made for a quiet loop with almost no foot traffic. I left around 10:30 a.m., took my time, stopped for lunch near a creek. Rook was in high spirits, chasing squirrels and sniffing everything. I had planned to be back by 3. Sometime after noon, I noticed the trail got harder to follow. Not overgrown exactly, just vague. The ground had this thick carpet of wet leaves, and the trees started looking real similar in every direction. I wasn't worried. I had a compass, and the GPS on my phone usually worked once I climbed a bit. Still, I kept glancing around more than usual. That's when I stepped into it. There wasn't a visible line or anything. Just suddenly, the air felt different. Thicker, maybe. My ears popped. Not like on a plane, but sharp, both at once. Rook froze. Not like he heard something, more like he hit an invisible wall. His tail dropped, and he started backing up, but slowly, like he wasn't sure he was allowed. I called to him, but my voice sounded flat. That was the first thing that really rattled me. I could hear myself speak, but there was no echo, no forest sounds under it, no wind, no birds, nothing. Just me and Rook and this dead air. I stepped forward again, maybe 5 or 6 feet. It was like walking into a pressure bubble. My skin felt prickly, like when you stand too close to a TV with static. Rook stayed back. I turned to look at him and he wouldn't meet my eyes. Just stood there, stiff as a board, staring past me. I pulled my phone out, more out of habit than anything. No signal, as expected. But the clock said 2:47 p.m. I stared at it for a while. Last time I checked, it was just before 1 when I stopped for lunch. I couldn't figure it out. I hadn't been walking that long. I wasn't tired, I hadn't eaten again or taken a nap or anything. I remember the whole hike up to that point. But somehow I'd lost nearly 2 hours. I backed out the way I came. As soon as I crossed whatever threshold I'd stepped through, my ears popped again, this time in reverse, and the forest noise came rushing back. Wind in the branches, birds, a squirrel scampering off through the brush. Rook bolted toward me and pressed against my leg, shaking like he'd been cold, even though the air was warm. I stood there for a while, staring at the spot I'd just walked out of. From the outside, it didn't look any different. Same trees, same rocks, same light, but it felt wrong, like a place pretending to be a forest. Eventually, I tried to go around it. I figured maybe it was just a weird patch of weather or something, and I could loop around and get back on the trail, but no matter which way I went, I kept ending up back at the same spot. I tried going left for 10 minutes, marking trees with a bit of tape, bright orange stuff I always carry in my pack, but the tape would vanish after 20 yards. I tied one to a low branch and watched it. Took 10 steps forward, turned around, gone. I didn't like that. I turned around completely and followed my original trail back the way I came. It took me almost twice as long to get back to the creek. The sun was already behind the ridge by the time I made it to familiar ground. I didn't see another hiker all day. When I got back to the cabin, it was almost 6 p.m. My legs ached like I'd done a 20-mile loop, but my GPS tracker, which I'd set to record the hike, showed a total distance of only 5.4 miles. It cut off completely at 12:52 p.m., then resumed again at 3:06 p.m. from nearly the same coordinates. The part that stuck with me, and still does, was what happened that night. I was inside with the wood stove going, trying to calm Rook down. He kept pacing, wouldn't touch his food. He'd stare out the window, then go to the door, then back to the corner and lie down, only to get up again a minute later. I finally let him out to see if he had to go, and the second I opened the door, he bolted. I had to chase him down the trail with a flashlight. He stopped maybe 50 feet from the cabin, panting, hackles up, staring at the woods in the direction of that patch. The flashlight beam flickered, not like the battery was dying, more like interference. That doesn't make sense, I know, but it felt like the light itself was being pulled or bent. I turned back fast, and Rook followed without needing to be called. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to a high-pitched buzzing sound, real faint, almost like a dentist's drill off in the distance. It started low, grew a little, then cut out. Rook was sitting up, eyes fixed on the wall like he could see something moving outside. There was no light out there, no sound after the buzz stopped, just stillness. I didn't go out. Next morning, I packed up early, cut the trip short. I told the cabin owner I wasn't feeling well. He didn't seem surprised, just nodded and said, "Happens sometimes." I haven't gone back. It was a Thursday morning, early September. I remember that because we'd had a string of hot days and finally got a cool front that rolled in overnight. I got up around 6, same as always, made coffee, fed the dogs, and headed out to check the pasture before starting on the fencing repair I'd been putting off. We've got about 40 acres, mostly pasture, some woods near the south end, and it's just me and my wife out here. She was in town visiting her sister that week, so I was by myself. I noticed it right away, maybe 50 yards from the back gate. A square, perfectly square, burned into the grass. It was probably 10 feet by 10 feet. Sharp corners, straight lines. The grass inside it was brittle, dead-looking, not blackened or charred, just dry, like it had been microwaved. Outside the square, everything was normal, green, soft, dew-covered. But inside that square, it looked like mid-July after a month of no rain. I walked around it twice. No tracks, no tire marks, no footprints. I bent down and touched the grass. It crumbled under my fingers. Not ashes, just dead. And there was this smell, like ozone, or static. I don't know how to describe it exactly, almost metallic. Not strong, but it lingered. I looked up. Clear sky, no sign of a storm. We hadn't had lightning. I would have heard it, and the dogs would have raised hell. I went back to the barn, grabbed a shovel, and tried to dig up a bit of the dirt from the middle. It came up dry, and we guessed but not scorched. No heat, no soot, just dry soil, almost powdery. I figured maybe a crop duster dumped something by accident, but we don't get planes out here often, and there wasn't any residue or chemical smell, just that faint ozone scent. Later that day, I told my neighbor Joe about it. He's got land just west of ours, and he came by to look. He stood there a while, chewing on a toothpick, then asked if I'd been burning anything. I told him no. He kicked at the edge of the square with his boot, then shrugged and said it was probably kids with a drone and some kind of prank. But it wasn't just the square that got to me. That night, around 2 a.m., the dogs started whining. Not barking, whining. I got up, checked the back porch. They were both standing at the door, ears back, tails down. Usually they bark at anything that moves, raccoons, coyotes, wind. But they just stood there, quiet, eyes on the field. I stepped outside and listened. Nothing. No wind, no bugs, no distant trucks. Just silence, the kind that feels heavy. I didn't have a flashlight on me, but the moon was bright enough to see. I looked out toward the pasture. That square was still there, just darker now in the moonlight. Nothing moved. I waited maybe 5 minutes, then went back inside. The dogs followed and curled up under the kitchen table. Next morning, I checked again. Still there. Still dry. I brought a camera out and took a few pictures, but they didn't show much, just a brown square in the grass. Nothing weird unless you already knew what to look for. That day I noticed something else. My phone battery died by noon. It was at 80% in the morning. I hadn't used it except to check the time and take those pictures. I plugged it in, but it charged slower than usual. The wall clock in the kitchen was 10 minutes off, too. Thought maybe the battery was low, but it was fine when I checked it. That night, I brought a lawn chair out to the edge of the pasture, just to see if anything happened. Around 10, I started seeing small lights, way off in the distance, moving low to the ground. Not headlights, no roads out that direction. Just pasture and woods. They weren't bright. Just little pulses, like someone flicking a lighter over and over. But they moved, side to side, up and down. Too smooth to be people walking with flashlights. No sound. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes before they faded. Dogs didn't bark. Whole time they just sat at the fence, staring. 2 days later, the square was still there. The grass hadn't changed, still brittle, still dry, but the area around it started to look different. I don't know how to explain it, just a subtle shift. The grass outside the square grew faster than usual, greener, healthier, like the soil got a boost, but inside it stayed dead. I brought out a moisture meter I use for the hay fields. Readings inside the square were low, almost zero. Just outside the square, normal, even a little higher than normal in some spots. That afternoon, while I was out walking the fence line, I heard a hum. Not loud. Low, almost like a diesel engine idling far off, but steady. I turned expecting to see a truck, but there was nothing. No dust trails, no headlights. I stood still for a minute, and the hum just stopped, like someone flipped a switch. When I got back to the barn, the power was out. Only for a few seconds, but it flicked off and on. The radio reset, the electric fence controller blinked like it had lost connection. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was outside. I kept getting up, checking the windows. Nothing, but the dogs paced, back and forth. No barking, just pacing. Around 3 a.m., I looked out the bedroom window and saw the square glowing. Not bright, just a soft, faint shimmer, like heat rising off pavement again, but steadier. I went out onto the porch with my flashlight. When I shined it on the square, the shimmer stopped. Grass still looked the same. I walked out to it, slow. Dogs stayed back at the house. I crouched down, touched the dirt again. Still dry, but the air felt warmer over it. Not hot, just a few degrees different, like standing near a heating vent. I stayed there for a while, just listening. Again, nothing. No wind, no bugs, just quiet. Next morning, the shimmer was gone. No trace of it. But now the square looked cleaner, like something had sucked the moisture and color out completely. I left it alone after that. Stopped walking the dogs near it. Stopped talking about it. A week later, it rained. Good, steady rain all afternoon. Everywhere on the property got soaked, except that square. I went out after the storm passed and checked. The ground around it was muddy, grass wet, but inside the square, dry as ever. The grass still hasn't grown back. It's been months. Sometimes at night I still hear that hum, just for a few seconds, then gone. I don't go out when I hear it. Neither do the dogs. We just wait. Then it stops. I've never seen anything leave tracks. Nothing flies overhead, but that square is still out there and it's not fading. I was about 3 miles up on the Pine Ridge Loop when it happened. Early fall, late September. It was one of those hikes I'd planned last minute, just trying to squeeze in something after work before the days got too short. I got to the trailhead later than I meant to, around 5:30, so I knew I'd be racing sunset a bit, but I had a headlamp in my pack and figured I'd turn around halfway if I lost light. The first couple miles were normal. Trail was dry, air was cool. It had that early autumn quiet to it. No bugs, not much wind, just the sound of my boots and the occasional squirrel bolting across the trail. I only passed one other person, a guy heading back toward the lot with earbuds in. We nodded and kept moving. By the time I reached the ridgeline, the sun was starting to dip below the far side of the valley. I stopped at the top to take a break. There's this flat rock outcrop that looks west across the trees and the hills beyond, and I've sat there before during longer hikes. It's a peaceful spot. Usually you can see a few birds circling or a deer trail down below. That evening, though, there wasn't much of anything, just stillness. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a drone. It was hovering maybe 100, 150 feet above the ridge on the opposite side of the valley, not moving, just sitting there, reflective, not fleck bright or flashing, just catching the light in this weird, dull way, like the way metal looks underwater. The shape was hard to make out. It wasn't round exactly, and it wasn't sharp-edged either. Kind of like a stretched-out drop, almost. It didn't wobble or shift like most drones do when they're holding position. It was perfectly still. I stood there for a few seconds just watching it. The longer I looked, the more off it seemed. There was no noise. Nothing. And it wasn't catching the sunset the way everything else was. The sky behind it had gone all orange and pink, and this thing stayed flat gray, like it didn't reflect color. I pulled out my phone. I didn't think much of it at first. Just figured I'd zoom in, take a video, maybe figure out what kind of drone it was. But the second I lifted the phone and pointed the camera, the screen wouldn't focus. Everything went blurry. Not just the object, everything. Like the autofocus was stuck in the wrong depth and couldn't correct. I tapped the screen. Nothing. Switched to photo mode, then back to video. Same thing. I tried to zoom. The image jumped a little, then froze. My phone just locked up for a second. I lowered it to look at the screen, and that's when I saw the battery indicator drop, like physically drop, straight from 89% to 0%. It didn't fade. It didn't say low battery or give a warning, just 89 to black. The screen went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, totally still. I didn't move or say anything for a solid minute, just stared across the ridge. The object was still there, exactly where it had been, but now it felt different. I don't know how to explain it. Before it was just odd. Now it felt like it was aware of me. I know how that sounds. I backed away from the outcrop slowly. I didn't run. I didn't even turn my back on it at first. I just moved downhill a few steps at a time, keeping it in sight until I was far enough into the trees that the ridge blocked my view. The forest felt wrong. Not loud, not quiet, just wrong. No birds, no wind. Just my footsteps and this faint, high-pitched ringing in my ears. I stopped and took my pack off, thinking maybe my headlamp or my phone charger had turned on and was making the sound, but everything was off. I pressed the phone's power button. No response. I started moving fast. The trail back to the parking lot wasn't long, but it felt longer. I kept checking over my shoulder, even though I didn't see anything. It was just this weight in the air, like something behind me, even I was alone. I passed a wooden signpost about a mile from the trailhead, the one that says Trail 4A and has a little arrow carved into it. And that's when I noticed the ringing stop. Not fade, just stop. The moment it did, every hair on my arm stood up. I kept going. Didn't stop again. I reached the parking lot just after the last light disappeared from the sky. Mine was the only car left. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there for a second with the engine off, staring into the trees. My phone was still dead. I didn't turn on music. I didn't check the rear view. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel too tight the whole way. The weirdest part came the next morning. I plugged in my phone overnight. It turned on like normal. Battery showed 82% when I woke up. I checked my photos and videos. Nothing from that hike, not even the stuff I took earlier on the trail. My entire camera roll from that day was gone. And the timestamp for the last file saved? 4:17 p.m. Over an hour before I reached the ridge. I worked as a satellite technician for a mid-sized aerospace company out in Colorado Springs, mostly doing shift work in a windowless control room filled with screens, blinking lights, and way too much coffee. My job was pretty straightforward. Monitor satellite telemetry, check for any anomalies, and make sure everything stayed online and on track. Nothing glamorous. Mostly, it was just staring at radar blips and data points for hours at a time. But there was this one thing I couldn't explain. It started about 6 months into the job. On the monitoring software we used, there was this object that popped up sometimes. It wasn't part of any known satellite constellation or debris field. It wasn't moving like a satellite should either. Satellites follow predictable orbits, right? This thing, though, would show up at random positions on the screen, never twice in the same spot, sometimes close to the horizon line, sometimes far overhead, and it wasn't orbiting, at least not in any way that made sense to me or my team. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was a glitch. The radar or sensor must have had some interference or a bug in the software, but every time it appeared, it was on a different scan at a different spot with no pattern at all. What made it creepier was the fact that it never stayed long enough for a second scan to confirm it. The monitoring system refreshed every few minutes, but this thing vanished before the next refresh. I couldn't lock onto it or get any data, just a blip that popped up, then disappeared. I asked around, mentioned it to a few coworkers casually, but no one else seemed to notice. Maybe they did and just dismissed it. I even checked with my supervisor, but they waved it off as sensor noise or space junk. One night during a late shift, it showed up again. I was working solo, which was typical for the graveyard shift, and staring at the screen felt more isolating than usual. The control room was silent except for the hum of the air system and the occasional beep from a status alert. I saw it blink onto the screen near the edge of coverage, small, round, and bright enough to catch my eye immediately. I zoomed in the radar display, trying to get a better look. The coordinates flashed. It was over the southwestern US, but not following any known orbit path. I tapped the track button, hoping to follow it on the next scan. The system started the countdown, refresh in 60 seconds. I leaned forward, eyes glued to the monitor. Right before the update, the blip shifted. Not in a smooth curve like a satellite moving along a trajectory, but like it jumped. A few seconds later, it vanished altogether. I checked the logs. No satellite or object matching that signature had been cataloged. The area it last appeared over was mostly empty desert. I spent the next few weeks obsessively checking every scan, waiting for it to reappear. It always came back, but in a different place, with no pattern, and always vanished too quickly to catch more than a fleeting glimpse. A few times I tried calling in to my supervisor during the day to tell them what I'd seen. They kept saying it was just interference or glitches and that I shouldn't worry. But it bothered me. This wasn't normal. One night, I even tried recording the radar feed with my phone, thinking if I caught it on video, I could prove it existed. The video showed a brief blip appearing and disappearing, but every time it happened, the screen's timestamp jumped backwards by about 30 seconds, like the system was resetting briefly. I watched the clip over and over, but couldn't explain that either. The system I worked with was supposed to have strict logging and timing, so that anomaly didn't make sense. A few other odd things happened around the same time. My home Wi-Fi started cutting out sporadically, with no clear reason. My phone battery drained faster than usual, and I'd find my apps behaving strangely, like notifications popping up seconds before I got the messages. One night, about a month after I first noticed the object, I took my dog Bixby for a walk around my suburban neighborhood. It was late, maybe 11:30 p.m., and the sky was clear and cold, the kind of crisp winter air that makes your breath cloud in front of you. I had my phone out checking the satellite tracking app. Yeah, I'm that obsessed. And Bixby was sniffing every tree like usual. I stopped and looked up. The stars were bright and steady, but there was something else. A faint glimmer far off, moving slowly, but not like any plane or satellite I'd ever seen. It wasn't flashing, and it wasn't making noise. Bixby suddenly stiffened and growled low. I tugged on his leash, telling him to calm down, but he wouldn't look away from the sky. The light disappeared, just like the blip on my screen. I thought maybe I was just tired, imagining things. Back at work, I told a few other night shift techs about the dog reacting to the sky, but they just shrugged. The job was draining, and most people were glad to hear something breaking the monotony. One evening, the tracking system glitched again. The object appeared twice on the screen at opposite ends of the coverage area. I blinked, then zoomed in. Both blips pulsed faintly, like they were sending signals or just flickering. The system froze for a second, then both vanished at once. Right after that, my workstation screen flickered and shut off. The backup kicked in, but the system was slow to reboot. When it came back online, the log files for that night had a weird gap. About 5 minutes of missing data. I reported it, but no one else saw anything unusual. The official explanation was a temporary power surge at the facility. That night, after my shift, I drove home under a heavy cloud cover. The streetlights blurred through the fog, and I kept glancing up, half expecting to see the object again. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my front porch light flickering. I didn't have a chance to think before Bixby started barking, low and urgent. I opened the door and stepped inside, locking it behind me. I checked my phone. The tracking app was frozen on a blank screen. I shut it off, put it down, and sat at the kitchen table staring out the window. Something wasn't right. I didn't know what it was, but I felt like I was being watched. I never told my family about the blips or the weird things at work. They'd think I was losing it, or worse, that I was bringing some kind of paranoia home. A few days later, the object appeared again on the scans. This time I tried to alert my supervisor, pressing the emergency alert button, which was only for serious malfunctions or safety issues. A voice came through the speaker, calm and clipped. Technician, cease tracking unknown objects. Continue monitoring only registered satellites. Report anomalies through official channels. This message will be repeated. The line cut off abruptly. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. After that, I stopped trying to track it. The blips kept appearing, always in different places, always vanishing before anyone else could see them. I kept my head down, did my job. But sometimes when I'm alone at work, late at night, I still see the faint flicker on the radar, like a ghost signal. And the feeling of being watched doesn't go away. I've always liked night fishing. It's quiet, mostly just me, my rod, and the lake under the stars. My name's Tom Granger, and I live out near Lake Woodson, a small, pretty ordinary place in northern Wisconsin. Nothing fancy about it, just a bunch of trees, some cabins, and a lake that's usually calm and dark at night. My dog, Whiskey, a scruffy mutt with a lazy streak, usually comes with me. He's not much of a swimmer, but loves sitting on the dock and watching the water. One Friday night in early September, the air was cool, but still felt heavy, like the kind of night right before a storm rolls in. Whiskey and I headed down to the lake around 9:30 p.m., planning to fish for a few hours before calling it. The sky was clear at first, full of stars, but the wind had picked up a little, just enough to rustle the leaves and make the water's surface shimmer softly. We set up on the far end of the dock, the one that sticks out a little over the deepest part of the lake. The water there's usually still, even when it's windy, because the trees on the far shore block the worst of the gusts. I cast my line and settled in with a thermos of coffee. Whiskey curled up at my feet, eyes half closed. The night was peaceful, nothing but the occasional splash from a fish or the distant call of an owl. Then, about an hour in, I noticed something weird. At first, it was just a faint glow near the water's surface, about 30 feet from the dock. It looked like a light, but it was too dim and kind of diffuse, like someone had dropped a glow stick under the water and it was just barely visible through the dark. I leaned forward to get a better look. The glow was pale greenish white and didn't flicker or change shape. What caught me off guard was that the water around it wasn't disturbed at all. Usually, if something's floating or moving near the surface, there's some ripple or splash. This was perfectly still, like the light was just hovering there, no contact with the water at all. I figured maybe it was some kind of fish with bioluminescence or a reflection of something on the shore. I stood up and shone my flashlight toward it. The beam sliced through the dark, but the glow stayed the same, no reaction, no movement. Whiskey perked up, ears twitching, staring at the same spot. Then the light started to rise. Slowly at first, just inches above the water, then faster, moving upward like a bubble escaping from the lake bed. Except it wasn't a bubble, it was smooth, round, and glowed brighter as it rose. The water beneath it remained perfectly flat, no ripples, no waves, nothing. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, half expecting it to vanish or be some trick of the light. But it kept going, rising maybe 10 feet above the surface, then drifted horizontally, moving away from the dock and across the sky. I dropped my rod and grabbed my phone, fumbling to get the camera app open, but as soon as I focused on the glowing orb, the screen dimmed and then went black. I tried again, but it stayed that way, dead, as if the phone was refusing to record or even see the light. Whiskey growled low, his hackles up, and I felt a chill despite the mild air. The glow kept drifting silently, smooth and steady, with no sound or disturbance at all. It moved in a slow arc, like it was following some invisible path across the stars. I followed it with my eyes, heart beating a little faster until it just disappeared. not with a flash or a burst, just faded gently like turning off a lamp. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but after it vanished, the lake was still dead calm. No ripples, no waves, nothing to suggest anything had moved through the water or sky. I sat back down on the dock trying to process what I'd just seen. Whiskey stayed close, still tense, ears swiveling toward the trees in the lake. I kept glancing at my phone, hoping the camera would come back on, but it stayed black. The thermos was cold now, my hands shaking a little. For the rest of the night, I kept watching the sky, but nothing else showed up. No lights, no sounds, no weird reflections, just the normal quiet, the crickets, the wind in the trees, the occasional splash far off. The next morning, I told my neighbor Greg about it. He's a fisherman too, knows the lake like the back of his hand. Greg said he hadn't seen anything strange, but he didn't dismiss me. Just said, sometimes the lake has its mysteries, and that part of the world tends to mess with your head after dark. Over the next few days, I checked with a couple of other locals. A woman named Elsie mentioned seeing a faint light near the lake around the same time, but she thought it was just a flashlight or maybe some kids messing around. No one else saw anything like I did. I tried to find some explanation. Bioluminescent algae? Doesn't happen in freshwater lakes around here. Reflection from a boat? No boats were out that night. Fishing lights? None on the lake at all. No airplanes or helicopters in the area either. What stuck with me was the water, how it never moved, even though something was clearly coming up from it and floating away. The glow was there, bright and steady, but the lake didn't react like it should. Since then, I've gone back to the lake a few times, sometimes with whiskey, sometimes alone. The night I saw the light, the air was different somehow, thicker, heavier. I can't explain it. Other nights, it's just normal, calm, quiet. My phone still works fine now. No blackouts or dead screens. And whiskey? He's never liked going out on the dock after dark since that night. He stays close to shore and doesn't want to look out over the water. I don't know what that light was. I'm not sure I want to. It didn't hurt anyone, didn't say or do anything. Just showed up, drifted across the sky, and disappeared without a trace. But sometimes when the wind's right and the lake is perfectly still, I swear I catch a faint glow out there. Just under the surface, waiting. I was driving through eastern Montana on a late summer night, hauling a load from Seattle to Minneapolis. It was one of those stretches of highway where there's barely any traffic, no towns for miles, just long roads lined by flat fields and the occasional stand of scrubby trees. The sky was mostly clear, but there were some thin clouds drifting low, and the moon was just a sliver, barely lighting up the land. I'd been on the road since early afternoon, and by about 11:30 p.m. I was feeling that familiar creeping tiredness that comes from hours of nothing but highway and the drone of the engine. My dog, Jeb, was curled up in the bunk, snoozing. He's an older mutt, mostly black with a big white patch on his chest. He doesn't bark much, but he's good company for the lonely miles. I glanced over at the GPS and saw I had about 300 miles left to my next stop, a rest area just outside Miles City. I figured I'd keep pushing a bit longer, but then, out of nowhere, a flash lit up the sky ahead. Not lightning, no thunder, and the clouds didn't look stormy, but a sudden, bright white light, almost like a camera flash, but way bigger and more intense, right over the horizon. I slammed on the brakes, pulled off the highway onto the gravel shoulder, and cut the engine. Jeb woke up, looking around groggily, but didn't make a sound. I sat there for a minute, eyes on the sky. The flash didn't repeat, just that one sharp burst of light, then silence. I figured maybe it was a plane or a helicopter with a spotlight, but there was nothing else up there. No sound, no blinking red lights like on aircraft. The radio was dead quiet. I checked the gauges, everything normal. The hum of the engine gone, just the quiet of the night. I leaned back in my seat, thinking maybe I'd just rest my eyes for a bit. That's when I noticed something strange. The usual buzz of insects was missing. Even the wind that usually rustled the dry grass was dead, just still air and that eerie silence. Jeb curled up again, resting his head on my knee. I don't know how long I was there. I checked the clock, 1:15 a.m. I figured I must have been sitting for about 20 minutes. I started the engine, pulled back onto the highway, and continued driving. The road was empty, the sky clear, but something about the whole situation felt off. I stopped at the rest area around 3 a.m. I filled up on coffee, stretched my legs, let Jeb run around the lot for a bit. When I looked at the GPS log later, that's when the weird part hit me. According to the tracker, I hadn't just sat there for 20 minutes like I thought. The truck was completely still for 1 hour and 47 minutes. I stared at the screen, confused. I swear I was only parked for less than half an hour, maybe 20 minutes tops. I checked the time on my phone. It matched the truck's clock now, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. I called a buddy of mine, Nate, who's also a trucker and pretty tech savvy. I asked if the GPS could have glitched or lost signal. He said it was unlikely. The satellite coverage in that area was good, and the device I used was reliable. I went back over everything I could remember from that stretch. The flash, the silence, the feeling that time had slipped somehow. There was no radio chatter, no other vehicles, nothing. I didn't see any other lights, no planes, no cars on the shoulder. The sky was dark, except for a scattering of stars, and the flash was the only bright thing that had happened. On the drive after the rest stop, I kept glancing at the GPS. The time log was clear. I'd been stopped, sitting still, almost 2 hours longer than I thought. That night in the motel, Jeb wouldn't stop pacing. He looked tense, ears twitching toward the window, and he kept low growling at the dark outside. I couldn't sleep either. The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I got. No one else on the road had seen anything. The other truckers I talked to said it was a normal night. I don't know what happened out there, but something about that flash and the time I lost makes me wonder if I wasn't alone. I'm sticking to the logs and the memory I have. I stopped the truck. I saw a flash. I sat there. But how does almost 2 hours disappear when I remember barely 20 minutes? Jeb and I keep our runs, but I avoid that stretch of highway now. Maybe that's for the best. We were somewhere west of Denver, cruising at 31,000 feet. Night shift, smooth air, stars clear as glass. I'd flown this route maybe 24 times before. Portland to Kansas City, just a quiet red eye over the Rockies. It was January, I think. Cold as hell on the ground, but steady up high. Co-pilot that night was Tyler, younger guy, former Air Force, sharp. Not much of a talker unless he was on his second cup of coffee, which he wasn't yet. We were about an hour into the flight. Nothing unusual. We had checked in with Denver Center, got handed off, and I was just staring out the left side window, watching the edge of the world slide by. That's when I saw the light. It wasn't a star. It wasn't another plane. I know what anti-collision lights look like. I know what satellites look like. This was none of those. It was flashing, not blinking. There's a difference. Not rhythmic like a strobe, more like a camera flash. Bright, short bursts of white light. 2 or 3 flashes close together, then dark. A pause. Then it'd repeat. No color, no red or green wing lights, just white. And it wasn't above or below us. It was dead level with us. Same altitude, maybe a mile off the port side. I leaned forward a little and tapped the glass with my knuckle, just out of habit, like that would help me see it clearer. "Tyler," I said. "You see that?" He looked up from the display. "See what?" I pointed. The light flashed again, 3 quick bursts. "That." He turned his head, squinting. "Where?" I kept my finger up, tracking it. "Left side, 10 o'clock. Same level." He leaned toward the window, trying to spot it. Another flash. I saw it clear as anything. Same spot, same pattern. But Tyler didn't react. "I don't see it," he said. I watched for another full minute. It flashed 2 more times, same sequence each time. Then it went dark completely. I radioed in, "Denver Center, horizon 297. We've got a flashing light at our altitude. 10 o'clock position, maybe 1 to 2 miles out. Can you confirm any traffic out here?" There was a pause. "Horizon 297, negative radar contact in your vicinity. You're clear for 100 miles in all directions." I glanced at Tyler. He was staring at the nav screen now, probably double-checking our position. I could tell he was trying to reason it out. Weather balloon, drone, whatever, but he didn't say anything. We didn't talk much for the next 10 minutes. I kept glancing out the window. It didn't flash again. Then I felt the nose pitch slightly. Not much, just enough that I thought maybe we were in light turbulence. But there was nothing on the scope. No shear, no chop. I checked the instruments. Everything was normal. Tyler looked at me. Did you feel that? Yeah. We checked the controls. No faults. Airspeed steady, pressure normal. Then, something weird happened. The cabin lights flickered. Just for a second. We've got emergency backup, so it wasn't a concern flight-wise, but still, LEDs like that don't just flicker. They either work or they don't. I radioed again. Denver Center, Horizon 297, we just had a minor electrical anomaly. Cabin lights flickered. No warning indicators. Another pause. Copy that, Horizon. Weather's clear all the way through to Kansas. No reported anomalies. We flew on. 15 minutes later, Tyler said, "Okay, I just felt that again." The nose dipped slightly, then corrected on its own. Autopilot was still engaged, but it was like the aircraft made a micro-adjustment without any input. Too subtle to trigger a warning. That's when I noticed the hum, not the engines. You fly long enough, you learn to tune that out. This was, I don't know, higher pitched. Almost like feedback through a headset, but not quite. More like pressure. My ears popped once, then again, like we were climbing, but we weren't. "Cabin pressure's stable," Tyler said, reading my mind. Then, boom, light again. Same spot, 10 o'clock, 3 quick flashes. But this time I felt something else, a split-second disorientation. Like my depth perception shifted, or the horizon moved slightly off level, only for a heartbeat, and then everything was back to normal. I turned fully toward the window. Nothing. Black sky. "I saw it again," I said. Tyler looked over. I didn't. That's when I noticed he looked pale. Not scared exactly, more off. Like something was bothering him, but he couldn't pin it down. He said, "What time is it?" I checked my watch. He checked his own. I had 2:40. We compared them. Both synced pre-flight. Cockpit clock said 2:12. Nothing lined up. Weird, but sometimes cockpit clocks drift a little, especially if the maintenance guys haven't calibrated. But both our watches being off by over 30 minutes, that didn't sit right. We crossed into Kansas airspace a little after 3. Clear skies, tailwind picked up, no more lights, no more weird dips. We landed on schedule. Ground crew didn't mention anything. I filed the anomaly report, logged it as an electrical flicker, and unconfirmed light sighting. No one asked questions. No one ever does. When we got to the hotel, Tyler didn't say much. He just nodded, said goodnight, and went to his room. Next day, I asked him again, "You really didn't see anything?" He shook his head. No light, just felt strange. I pushed a little. "Like what?" He paused, like something was right there, just out of view, but I couldn't look straight at it. We left it at that. A few weeks later, I flew that route again. Different co-pilot, same time, same altitude, no lights, but I kept looking. The motion light went off again at 3:17 a.m., same as the night before. Third night in a row. It was the one on the back corner of the house, the one facing the field behind the property. The sensors mounted just above the kitchen window. When it trips, it washes about a 60-foot patch of overgrown grass in pale yellow light. Past that, it's just scrub brush and old fence posts, and then another half-acre of open space before the tree line. We've got about 3 acres total out here in southeastern Missouri. I moved in 4 years ago after my divorce. Needed quiet, got more than I bargained for. Anyway, I only knew it had gone off because Boone jumped in the bathtub again. That's his thing when something spooks him. Doesn't matter what it is, thunder, gunshots, once even a wind chime, I'll find him curled up in the tub, shaking like a leaf. Boone's a redbone coonhound mix. He's not young, not old either. Normally doesn't scare easy. He barks at coyotes, patrols the fence line like he owns the whole county. But 3 nights now, same thing. Light clicks on at 3:17 and Boone bolts straight to the bathroom without a sound. The first night I figured it was a raccoon. I went out with the flashlight, checked the yard, checked the barn, nothing. Second night, I was already half awake when Boone took off. This time I looked at the clock. 3:17. Dead on. I got up slower that time, more annoyed than anything, and looked out the kitchen window. The light was on. The yard looked normal. Still as a painting. No movement, no rustling, no bugs even. Just the grass bending a little in the breeze. Then last night, it happened again. Same time, 3:17. I was already awake when Boone scrambled off the bed and made a beeline for the tub. I didn't get up right away. I waited. Just lay there, listening. The house was quiet. No footsteps, no engine sounds, no voices. Just Boone's nails clicking on the tile as he settled in. I finally got up around 3:25, went to the window. The motion light was still on, but just barely, flickering a little like it was about to time out. I stood there for a while staring at that patch of grass. My eyes adjusted, but I didn't see anything out of place. Then I noticed the scarecrow. I don't have a scarecrow, but there was something out there, about 20 feet past the edge of the light, just where the brightness fades into shadow. Looked like a figure, too thin to be a person, too straight to be natural. No limbs I could make out, just a vertical shape like a post or a man standing still with his arms at his sides. I blinked, and it was gone. I thought maybe I imagined it. Could have been a fence post catching the light wrong. Could have been my reflection in the glass. So I opened the back door and stepped out onto the porch. Didn't bring a light. I just stood there in the warm air, letting my eyes adjust all over again. The field was empty. Next morning I walked out there, took Boone with me, though he didn't want to go at first. I had to leash him, and even then he dragged his feet. There wasn't much to see. Grass a little flattened in spots, but nothing that screamed animal. No prints, no broken stalks, no burn marks or dead patches. Just grass. But when I looked back at the house from that spot where I'd seen the figure, I realized something strange. From there, you can't see the light itself, just the glow. Whatever or whoever was standing in that exact place would have been perfectly framed by it, lit just enough to see their shape, but not their face. That night, I stayed up, didn't sit in the living room or anything. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, just me and a cold cup of coffee, and Boone curled up on the rug by the fridge. I kept one eye on the digital clock above the stove. 3:10, 3:15. At 3:17, the light clicked on. No sound, no buzz, no hum, just a soft pop as the bulb came to life. Boone stood up immediately, ears flat, tail low. He didn't look at me. He looked at the window. I stood too, careful not to scrape the chair legs. I walked over to the sink and leaned forward just enough to peek outside. There was something in the field, closer this time, maybe 10 feet from the edge of the light, just barely out of it. Same thin shape, same dead still posture. Not moving, not swaying with the breeze like the grass around it. It was just there. Watching, I think. I opened the back door. Boone growled, a sound I'd only heard him make once before, when a neighbor's pit bull got into our yard. He didn't follow me out. I stood on the porch again, this time with my flashlight. I waited until my eyes adjusted, then flipped it on and pointed it right at the spot. Nothing. The figure was gone. But the grass was moving. Not like something walked through it. More like it was settling. Like something heavy had been there, pressing it down, and had just lifted off. It rippled outward in slow waves. No wind, just motion. I didn't walk out there. I wanted to, but my legs wouldn't move. The light timed out after 30 seconds. The yard went dark. I backed into the house and locked the door. Boone was already in the tub. That morning, I found something. Out in the field, in the same spot where the shape had been, I found 3 small holes, each about the size of a quarter, perfectly round, spaced maybe 2 feet apart, forming a triangle. Not deep, maybe 5 inches, but clean. No dirt piled around the edges, like whatever made them hadn't broken the surface so much as pressed through it. I filled them in and covered the area with an old tarp from the barn. I don't know why. That was last week. Since then, the light hasn't come on again. But Boone still sleeps in the bathroom now, every night without fail. Even when I call him to bed, he just looks at me and slinks away like he knows something I don't. I haven't reset the motion sensor. I haven't walked out into the field after dark, and I haven't been able to sleep through 3:17 a.m. since. I was working the night shift at a storage facility on the outskirts of Lincoln, Nebraska last fall. My name's Jake. I'd taken the job because I'd recently moved back home after college, and it was steady enough to cover bills while I figured out what to do next. The place was mostly quiet, a bunch of metal storage units lined up behind a chain link fence, and a handful of security cameras feeding to a monitor in the office where I sat. It was about 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday when I noticed something that didn't add up. The night had been calm. the usual hum from the streetlights, a distant dog barking, maybe once or twice, but otherwise, nothing. I was scrolling through footage on the monitor, killing time, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move in the parking lot through the big front window. At first, I thought it was just a shadow from a passing car's headlights, but there weren't any cars around, and the lot was empty except for a few trailers. I stood up, looked out through the glass, nothing there, just empty asphalt lit by those orange streetlights. I sat back down, feeling a little dumb for getting jumpy, and kept watching the monitors. Then it happened again. This time, the shadow was sharper. It moved fast, a flicker, low and wide, just on the far edge of the lot by the fence. It didn't look like any animal I'd seen, too big and oddly shaped. The weird part was that there were no lights anywhere near it. No headlights, no flashlight, no glow at all. It was just a dark, dark shape moving like it was sucking up the light around it. I tried to shake it off and went outside to check. The night was unusually cold for October. There was this strange breeze, but it didn't feel natural. Usually when the wind picks up, it rustles the leaves, rattles the chain link fence, maybe kicks up some dust. But this breeze was silent. It didn't move anything. It just kind of hung in the air, cold and still. Walking around the parking lot, I kept looking for whatever the shadow had been. No footprints, no signs of anyone or anything. The trailers were locked up tight, no gaps or places someone could hide. It was just me, the cold, and that eerie feeling that I wasn't alone. Back inside, I tried to get back to work. The security system was mostly automated, but every now and then, I had to run checks or respond to alarms. That night, nothing went off, but every so often I caught a glimpse of that shadow on the monitors, always darting just out of full view. It never came close to the cameras, just enough to be noticed. Then around 3:20 a.m., everything went quiet. I don't mean the usual quiet of night shifts. I mean like the world itself stopped making noise. The hum of the lights, the buzz of the fridge in the office, even the ticking of the clock on the wall, it all faded away. I looked out the window and saw the parking lot in complete stillness, bathed in that dull orange light. The wind was gone, the shadows frozen. Then, across the lot near the fence, a shape moved again. This time I saw it clearly, but it wasn't a person, at least not like a human. It was dark, maybe 6 feet tall, but the shape was wrong. The edges blurred, like it was bending or melting into the night. It didn't have features, no eyes, no face, no limbs I could make out. Just a blackness against the orange light. The weirdest part was how the air around it looked. It was like the heat was sucked out of a small patch of the night. I felt the cold hit me suddenly, a drop in temperature that felt deeper than the fall air. I wanted to call someone, but my phone was dead, no signal. I tried blinking, hoping it was a trick of tired eyes or shadows. When I looked back, the figure was gone. The air warmed up again, the sounds of the night slowly returned. The buzz in the office kicked back in. I sat down hard, hands shaking a bit, trying to figure out what I'd just seen. I wanted to convince myself it was a shadow, or maybe a trick with the streetlights and the fence, but it felt too real, like it was watching me. I finished my shift without anything else happening. I didn't see the shape again, and the cameras showed nothing unusual. When I told the day manager what happened, he just nodded and said, "Storage facilities attract weird stuff at night." I laughed it off, but inside I wasn't so sure. That's the thing. I don't know what it was. No footsteps, no noise, just that cold presence and the black shape moving across the parking lot. Every night since then, I keep expecting to see it again, but it hasn't come back. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I feel like something's watching me from the shadows, but whenever I turn around, there's nothing there. Maybe it was just me. Maybe not. Either way, that night at the storage lot is one of those things I can't quite explain. I was driving home late one evening, just after dusk, heading back from a weekend trip. The route took me past that old Air Force base outside of Valley Ridge, the one that's mostly inactive these days, but still has a few planes and occasional night exercises. The road runs parallel to the runway for a stretch, so I often slow down there just to watch the jets. It's kind of a weird habit I picked up. Something about watching them roar off into the sky feels calming after a long day. This night was cool and clear, not a cloud in the sky. The streetlights weren't very bright, so the runway lights stood out like little beacons. I was in my truck, windows down, the hum of the engine steady as I cruised along. Just past the main hangar, a fighter jet rolled into view on the runway, ready for takeoff. I pulled over near the chain link fence and watched. The jet's afterburners flared, and it zipped down the strip, lifting off smoothly into the air. Normally, the jet would climb fast, banking sharply, then disappear into the darkness, but this time it didn't behave like I expected. About 500 feet up, it just stalled, like someone hit pause on it. It hung there, perfectly still, engines screaming, but no movement. No wobble, no dive, no drift, just frozen in the air like it was glued. At first, I thought maybe I was seeing things. The air was clear, but the jet looked like it was suspended against the deepening blue sky. No motion at all. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe my brain was tired or the light was messing with me. Then, after maybe 5 seconds, the jet shot upward. Not just climbed, shot at an angle that made no sense. It was like it defied gravity, rising nearly straight up, engine roar fading into a high-pitched whistle as it disappeared above the clouds. The whole thing felt wrong, like the laws of physics were being ignored. No pilot I know could pull that off without the plane breaking apart or spinning out. But the jet looked intact, and the motion was smooth, like it was on rails. I stayed parked there, heart thumping, watching the spot where the jet vanished, half expecting it to come back down or lose control. Nothing. I got back on the road, but my mind was spinning. That jet takeoff was the strangest thing I'd ever seen, and I watched planes regularly. A few miles down, I noticed something odd in the side mirror. A pair of bright lights hovering just above the treetops behind me. They weren't like car headlights or any normal light I'd seen on the road. They were steady, round, almost glowing with this weird, soft light, and they kept pace with my truck no matter how fast I went. I slowed down to 35 miles per hour, watching in the mirror. The lights didn't blink or change. I tried looking over my shoulder, but the trees blocked a clear view. I sped up again, pushing toward 50 miles per hour. The lights stayed with me, moving silently through the dark. I thought about pulling off and stopping to see what it was, but part of me just wanted to get home. Then out of nowhere, the lights blinked out. Just vanished like a switch had been flipped. I checked all around. Nothing. When I got to my driveway, I sat in the truck for a while, trying to process everything. The jet, the hovering lights, the impossible climb. I felt weird, like I'd walked into something I wasn't meant to see. Over the next few days, I found myself driving that route again, hoping to catch a glimpse of the jet or those lights, but nothing happened. The base seemed quieter than usual. I talked to a couple of coworkers who've spent time near that airstrip, but no one mentioned anything unusual that night. Flight logs are off limits, and no news reports talked about any strange incidents. I keep wondering about that moment the jet just stopped midair. What held it up? And those lights, were they connected? Were they watching? I don't know, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know. But that night, something was different near that base. Something I can't explain. I was driving back from Flagstaff to Kingman late one night in October. My cousin's kid had a birthday, and I stuck around longer than I meant to. Helped clean up, talked to my uncle for a while. By the time I left, it was almost 11. The drive's a little under 2 hours if you're moving mostly I-40 through the desert, not much traffic. I've done it 100 times. I wasn't in a rush. Weather was dry, cool, moon was out, but not full. My truck's got a dash cam, one of those Viofo ones with front and rear views, records and loops. I only installed it a few months earlier after some guy ran a red light and tried to blame me. Now it just runs whenever the ignition's on. Nothing felt strange during the drive. It was quiet. I passed 2 semis between Seligman and Ash Fork, but otherwise I was mostly alone on the road. I had an audiobook playing, some old Raymond Chandler novel, and a Gatorade in the cup holder. It wasn't until I got home that I noticed anything weird. I park in the driveway, kill the engine, and gather my stuff from the passenger seat. I always glance at the dash cam when I shut off the truck. It's just habit now. But this time, the screen was frozen. It should have shown a goodbye message and then powered down. Instead, the screen was still on, stuck on a single frame. Black road, stars overhead, timestamp reading 12:38:11. But my truck's clock said 12:40. That bugged me. The camera syncs its time with the GPS, so it should have matched the truck's clock, which I just set that morning. I tapped the screen. It stayed frozen. I unplugged it, then plugged it back in. It rebooted normally, started recording again. Nothing looked damaged. Inside, I dumped my stuff and plugged the SD card into my laptop to check the files. They save in 3-minute chunks. I found the last full clip, ending at 12:38, then the partial one, the one that froze. That file was weird. It was only 2 seconds long, just 2 seconds instead of 3 minutes. I opened it. It starts with a normal view. Dark highway, center lines stretching out, desert brush on both sides, stars all over the sky, no other headlights. Then, on the very last frame before the video ends, everything goes black. Not the road. Not just the dash cam cutting off. I mean, the sky goes black. The stars blink out, just for that one frame. I checked it again, frame by frame. I used VLC and then a video editor just to be sure I wasn't missing something. In every frame before that, the sky is crystal clear. Dozens of stars, no clouds. Then on the last frame, no stars, not a single one. Still the same desert, same road, same truck interior, just stars. Then, nothing. The next file starts at 12:41, like the clock jumped ahead 2 minutes. And that clip picks up like nothing happened. Same stretch of highway, still no other cars. Stars are back. I checked the truck's GPS log too. That's how I really knew something was off. According to the GPS, I traveled exactly 0.1 miles during that gap. Not a huge distance, about 500 feet. But the speed listed was 0, like I wasn't moving. Like the GPS lost signal and then picked me up again slightly ahead with no record of motion in between. It didn't make sense. The rest of the drive looked normal. No missing footage, no glitches. I rewatched everything leading up to the gap, hoping maybe I'd notice something I missed the first time. Lights, reflections, weird shadows. But there's nothing. Except, okay, this part's hard to explain. In the 2 clips before the gap, there's this shimmer. I didn't see it when I was driving, but it shows up on the video. Around 12:35, in the upper right corner of the front camera, there's this faint movement, like heat distortion, almost. But it's not over the hood or road, it's in the sky. It's small, maybe the size of my thumb on the screen. It sort of wobbles in place, you know, when you're filming through a dirty wind window and a bug crawls across it out of focus. It reminded me of that. Only it's not on the lens, it's up there. The shimmer moves slightly over the next few minutes, maybe a few degrees to the left, and then it's gone. The stars behind it don't shift or change, but when that shimmer passes over them, they seem to blur, like something semi-transparent passed between the camera and the sky. That was around 12:37. The blackout happened at 12:38. I checked the rear cam too. At first, I didn't notice anything, but right around that same time, there's a single frame, just one, where a faint glow appears at the top center of the rear camera's view, like a wide arc of light, almost halo-shaped. It doesn't match any taillights or headlights. It's not bright, more like a faint smudge, but it's there. And then it's gone. I didn't tell anyone for a couple days. I wasn't sure what to even say. Eventually, I showed my neighbor Danny. He used to work for ADOT. He watches a lot of weird sky videos, so I figured if anyone would have an idea, it'd be him. He watched it all. Didn't say much. Just asked me, did you feel anything when it happened? I told him no. I didn't even notice anything on the drive. No sound, no lights, no static or dropouts on the radio. My audiobook never cut. No sign I lost time until I saw the dash cam. That's what bothers me the most. There's no moment I can point to where something felt off. I've driven that road at night plenty of times. I've been through dust storms and seen weird flashes from testing ranges off in the distance. This wasn't like that. I tried to upload the clip to a forum I use for car tech stuff, but the file wouldn't load properly. When I compressed it, the last frame, the blackout one, turned into corrupted green static. When I tried again using a screen recorder, that frame came out solid black, like it had been cut. The original still plays fine on my laptop, though. I saved it to a couple different drives just in case. Every now and then I play it back, frame by frame. There's nothing new to find. The stars blink out, then they come back, and I was just driving. I was driving east on Route 190, cutting through the Mojave, sometime past 11 p.m. It was mid-August, and even at night, the air felt dry and warm through the crack in the driver's window. I'd left Ridgecrest earlier that night, heading toward Pahrump, where my cousin Kyle lived. I was just planning to crash at his place for a day or two before heading into Vegas. That stretch of road is dead empty. No lights, no towns, barely even any signs. You just pass through scattered Joshua trees and hills that fade into black. I was maybe an hour past Trona, not a single car in either direction for miles. I hadn't seen headlights in maybe 30 minutes. The radio had gone static ages ago. It was sometime around 11:40 when I saw the first flash. Off to the right, far out, almost at the horizon, a bright white light lit up the low hills for a second and then vanished. No sound. Just this sudden, solid flash that lit the desert like lightning, but without the flicker. It looked artificial, not like lightning or heat lightning, more like the flash from a giant camera, if that makes sense. Too steady, too precise. At the exact same moment it flashed, my headlights dimmed, only for a beat, like someone lowered a dimmer switch, and then came right back to normal. I actually said, "What the hell?" out loud and sat up straighter. The battery light didn't come on, and the engine didn't stutter. I watched the dash. Everything looked fine. Maybe just a voltage dip or something, I thought. Old car. I drive a 2011 Civic, so it's not exactly brand new. About 3 minutes later, another flash. Same spot, same silent brightness lighting up the desert scrub. My headlights dimmed again, in perfect sync. Not a second before or after, exactly when that light popped. Like they were tied together. That's when I started getting nervous. I flicked the headlights off and on again. No change. I slowed down a little. I was doing about 70, dropped it to 55. I glanced at my phone, but I had no service. The little SOS only popped up where the bars should have been. I kept watching the right side of the road where the light had come from. There was nothing but dark hills and low desert brush. No towers, no buildings. Nothing out there. Then it happened a third time. Same white flash. Maybe a little closer? I couldn't tell. Just this sudden, perfect rectangle of brightness along the horizon. And again, my headlights dimmed with it like someone was flipping a switch. No thunder. No hum. No feeling in the air. Just the flash and the dimming. I was fully creeped out by that point. My arms were tight on the wheel, knuckles stiff. I looked in the rearview mirror and didn't see anything behind me. But I slowed more, dropped to maybe 40, which felt way too slow for that road, but I couldn't keep going like nothing was happening. About a mile later, I pulled off the road. There's no shoulder really, just dirt. I parked just enough off the asphalt that I wouldn't get clipped by some semi if one ever came through. I turned off the engine, left the parking lights on. I sat there with my window down, listening. It was dead quiet. No crickets, no wind. Just the sound of the engine ticking as it cooled down. Then, another flash. Same direction, same brightness. But this time, from inside the car, I felt something, like a small thump in the air. Not in the ground, in my chest, like a subtle pressure shift. My headlights weren't even on now, but the parking lights blinked. I swear they flickered for just a fraction of a second during the flash. I turned off all the lights and stepped out of the car. The air was warm, but weirdly still. No breeze, not even the usual desert whisper in your ears. I walked around to the passenger side and leaned on the hood, watching the hills where the light had come from. I couldn't see any source, no glow, just flat dark. I waited maybe 10 minutes. Nothing happened. I was starting to feel dumb, like maybe it was some military thing, maybe even just lightning, despite the clear sky. Then a different light appeared. Not a flash. This was more like a soft pulse. Higher up this time, in the sky. It blinked on for about a second, a soft, white glow like a dying LED, then off. It came back about 10 seconds later in a different part of the sky. Still silent, still weirdly round, not like a strobe or aircraft beacon. I kept watching. Another pulse, higher now. It blinked, moved a bit, blinked again, like it was jumping locations. Always the same soft light. No tail, no streak. Just on, off, on, but never in the same place. I backed toward the driver's door and got in the car. Left it off. Just sat there, door open, eyes on the sky. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe 15 minutes? The pulses stopped at some point, and I didn't see another flash like before. But when I finally turned the engine back on and looked at the dash clock, it said 1:12. I know for a fact I pulled over just after midnight, 11:50 something, when the first flash happened. I remember the number because I thought I'd reach Pahrump around 1. The drive should have been another hour from where I stopped. But now, with the clock showing 1:12, that meant I'd been sitting there for over an hour, which didn't make sense. I hadn't dozed off. I wasn't tired. I'd only had my eyes off the clock for maybe half an hour, tops. But somehow, that extra time was just gone. I drove the rest of the way without stopping. No more flashes, no more pulses, but I kept checking the rearview mirror constantly. The back of my neck felt tight the whole way, like I was being watched. When I got to Kyle's place, I didn't mention any of it. We stayed up drinking and watching reruns, and I just let it sit in my head. I did check my headlights the next morning. Nothing wrong with them. Battery was fine too. The weirdest part? The dash clock stayed exactly synced with my phone the rest of the trip. Never gained or lost a second. We were out on the lake late that night, just me and Jake, like we did most weekends when we wanted to get away from everything. It was one of those quiet, still nights where water looks like glass and the stars are so bright they almost feel close enough to reach. We had the little motorboat anchored a good distance from shore, lines in the water, just waiting for a bite. Nothing big planned, just fishing and talking, maybe catching some bass or catfish. The night was cold, but not freezing. I had a jacket on, Jake too. We sat on the back bench, each with a rod in hand. The only sound was the occasional plop when a bobber moved or a fish took a nibble. The boat creaked softly in the water, and the gentle ripple from our movements spread out around us. After a while, Jake went quiet, just staring out over the water behind the boat. I looked too, thinking maybe he saw something, maybe a bird or a fish jumping. Then we both heard it, a splash. It was sudden and heavy, like something big hitting the water hard right behind us. But here's the thing, there was no ripple, nothing spread out on the surface, just silence except for that weird splash noise. It was like the water had made the sound without moving. That didn't make sense. I looked over my shoulder and scanned the dark water. No wake, no movement. The surface was still perfectly smooth. Jake said, "Did you hear that?" I nodded, feeling a little uneasy. We both stayed still, waiting, expecting maybe to see something break the water. Then came this low droning sound, coming from beneath the boat. It wasn't like any engine noise or the usual hum of insects or the wind. It was deep and steady, almost like a vibration you could feel through your bones. It didn't get louder or softer, just stayed there, this constant low buzz under the water. I asked Jake if he heard it. He nodded again, eyes wide now. We didn't say much after that, both just listening. The droning went on for several minutes. It didn't seem to be coming from any direction. It was just under us. I looked back toward shore, but it was too dark to see much beyond the tree line. The moon had slipped behind clouds, so the lake looked endless and black. The only light came from the little flashlight Jake had on the side of the boat. I shone it over the water, trying to catch any movement, but nothing showed up. After maybe 5 minutes, the droning stopped suddenly. No fade out, no gradual decrease, just cut off. The silence felt even heavier afterward. I told Jake to pull up the lines and start heading back. Neither of us said why, but I think we both wanted to get out of there. As Jake fired up the motor, the water around the boat stayed unnervingly still. No wakes, no splashes from the propeller, nothing. Usually, even the smallest movement would stir something up, but the lake just sat there, like it was holding its breath. We headed back slowly, neither of us talking much. The boat's motor was the only sound, but the water didn't respond as I expected. It didn't ripple or splash against the hull. I was watching the water more than the path ahead, trying to make sense of the quiet. At one point, Jake asked if I felt anything strange, like a presence or being watched. I said yeah, but it was hard to explain. It wasn't fear exactly, more like something was out there in the water or just below the surface. Something that didn't want us to notice it, but also didn't want to be ignored. About halfway back to shore, the boat's GPS screen flickered and went blank for a few seconds. That's when I really started to feel uneasy. It came back on with no problem, but the little glitch made the whole situation feel even more off. We made it to the dock without incident, and when I stepped onto the wooden planks, the familiar creak of the boards felt like a relief. The night air seemed less heavy there, and the lake looked normal again, reflecting the moonlight and stars without any weird silence or strange noises. Jake and I packed up quietly, neither of us eager to talk about what had happened. On the way home, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see some light or shape following us, but there was nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that splash in my head and the low drone vibrating under the boat like it was still there waiting. I haven't been back out to that part of the lake since. Not sure if I'll go again anytime soon. I was flying a small single-engine Cessna that night, late July, somewhere over the outskirts of Oregon. The sky was clear, air smooth, and the heat from the day was still lingering in the cabin. I'd been up for a couple hours already, doing a routine night cross-country to keep my license current, flying VFR mostly. Just me and the plane. Nothing fancy. Around 11:15 p.m., I was cruising at about 5,500 feet westbound when I noticed something out the left window. At first, I thought it was another plane, maybe a twin engine or something, but the shape wasn't right. It was dark, almost completely black against the night sky, no navigation lights, no strobes, no sound. The kind of silence you notice when everything else, the engine, the wind, sounds normal, and this just doesn't make a peep. I shifted my gaze, trying to get a better look. The thing was maybe 300 yards away, flying alongside me, matching my speed perfectly. What really got me was the angle it was holding. It wasn't just flying beside me like a normal plane would. It tilted sharply, banked hard into turns that no regular aircraft should be able to do. Smooth and steady, almost like it was slipping through the air on its own terms. I glanced down at my instruments, triple-checking airspeed and altitude. No erratic readings, no turbulence, just my normal flight data. I looked back, and the shape was still there, still moving with me. I tried to radio it in. Cessna N8453P to unknown traffic. This is N8453P. Identify yourself. I hit the transmit button 3 times, but there was nothing on the other end. No call sign, no response, no static, just silence. And then, in the moment I was expecting something back, the thing disappeared. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. No fading, no flying off into the distance. Just gone, like it never existed. That's when I really felt it. The quiet in the cockpit felt heavier, like the air was thicker. I double-checked the windows, the instruments, and even the fuel gauge. Everything was normal. My heart was beating faster than usual, but I kept it together. I radioed Portland Approach to report the sighting, but they told me no other traffic was showing on radar. No unidentified objects or blips. I gave them my position again and asked if they saw anything unusual on their scopes. They confirmed nothing, said I must have seen a private aircraft or something off radar. I tried to explain the weird angles and silence, but they just told me to stay safe and keep an eye out. The rest of the flight was quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but nothing else showed up. When I finally landed, I filled out an incident report with the FAA. They didn't seem interested. Mostly gave me the usual line about optical illusions or atmospheric conditions. A few days later, I talked to some other pilots at the local flying club. One of them mentioned seeing something weird on his night flight months earlier, a dark shape that moved like nothing else. He said he didn't say anything because no one would believe him. Another pilot said he heard strange static on the radio during a night leg, but never saw anything. I never saw that thing again, but sometimes when I'm flying solo at night, I catch a glimpse out of the corner of my eye, something moving just at the edge of the lights, at impossible angles, always silent. And I can't help but wonder if it's still out there, watching. It was late September, and my buddy Carl and I had gone out to Goose Hollow Lake for some night fishing. That's up in northeastern Pennsylvania. Real quiet, not a lot of people. Carl's got a little aluminum boat with an electric trolling motor, and we'd taken it out to this cove on the north end of the lake. It's shallow there, Lots of lily pads and deadfall, good for bass. The sun had gone down around 7:15, and by 8 hood it was fully dark. No wind, just dead calm. Water was glassy, sky was clear, stars out, and the whole lake was still. We were both sitting on the bench seats, not saying much, just tossing lines and sipping warm beer. I remember it was unusually warm that night. Still in the low 70s even after sunset. No bugs either, which was odd. Usually up there you'd be swatting mosquitoes non-stop, especially near the water. But it was just quiet. No bugs, no frogs, no fish jumping. I only noticed how quiet it was once Carl mentioned it. "You hear that?" he said. I looked over. "What?" He sort of gestured around. "Exactly." It was like everything had muted at once. Even our voices felt too loud. The water lapped against the side of the boat, but there was nothing else. No crickets, no distant trucks. Just that dead silence. We sat still for a while, both listening. I don't know how long we were like that, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, when we saw this light through the trees on the east side of the lake. It wasn't bright, kind of a dull amber color, almost like a street lamp, but it was moving slowly above the tree line, gliding left to right. No strobing, no blinking, just this steady, quiet glide. I thought it might be a drone at first. Plenty of people fly them around, but it didn't have that high-pitched hum. Didn't make any noise at all. And it wasn't zigzagging or adjusting, just one smooth path like it was on rails. Carl stood up real slow and put his hand on my shoulder. He was squinting toward it. "You seeing that?" he asked. I nodded. We watched it for maybe 15, 20 seconds, just drifting across the treetops. Then it dipped behind the trees and disappeared. We both kept looking, expecting it to pop up again. Instead, it reappeared directly across the lake, on the west side now, maybe 2-3 seconds later. Same height, same amber glow, same silent glide. But there's no way something could have gotten across that fast. It would have had to cross about a mile of water and dense forest instantly. No sound, no flash. Just there, then not, then there again. Carl sat back down real slowly and just stared at it. "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. We watched it for another minute or so. It moved slower this time, like it was scanning something. Then it stopped, just hung there, completely still above the trees. I remember thinking how unnatural that looked. No sway, no drift, just locked in place like it had frozen. Then it blinked out, not like it flew away, not like it dimmed. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. No trail, no noise, just gone. We sat in the boat for a long time after that, neither of us saying anything. Eventually, Carl reeled in his line and said we should head back. I agreed. The weird part was, when we turned on the headlamp, we realized our watches were off. Mine said 9:22, Carl's said 10:03. I checked my phone. It said 10:39. We'd only brought 3 beers each, and we weren't drunk. The trolling motor was still running fine, and we'd only planned to stay out until 10. But somehow 2 hours had passed, and neither of us remembered that much time going by. On the way back to the dock, I kept glancing behind us, half expecting to see the light again. But the lake stayed dark. Still no bugs, still no sound. When we got to shore, everything looked normal. The truck was there, gear was dry, keys were in my pocket, but the truck clock was off too. It said 12:12, which didn't line up with anything. We didn't talk much driving home. Carl looked pale, and I think we were both trying to convince ourselves it was nothing. Just a weird light. Could have been a drone. Could have been anything. But that silence, how dead the lake went right before it showed up, that's what stuck with me. That and the time. A few days later, Carl told me he tried to go back out there during the day and got turned around trying to find the cove. He said the GPS on his phone wouldn't settle, kept jumping around, and his compass app spun in slow circles no matter which way he pointed it. I haven't been back to that lake since. I was on the dock just after midnight, filming. The lake was flat, the kind of still that swallows sound whole. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the air had that damp, heavy feeling you get right before rain starts. I was waiting for those lights to show up again, the weird ones I'd noticed the past few nights. My name's Lisa Moreno, by the way. I live in a small cabin on the outskirts of Ashford, Washington. It's about as close to the wilderness as you can get without completely disappearing from the map. I've always been the kind of person who likes to record stuff. weird stuff, strange things that don't add up. It's a hobby, or maybe an obsession. Anyway, those lights first appeared last week. I was out here, just messing around with my phone's camera, when these faint glimmers started flickering over the water, moving in patterns that didn't match anything natural. No planes, no bats, no fireflies. They looked like small orbs just hovering and then zipping. Didn't make sense. I figured I'd catch them on video and maybe post it somewhere later. Not to prove anything, I'm not that delusional, but just because it was strange. That night, I got some footage. The lights pulsed in a loose circle above the lake, sometimes darting up and down in a way that looked almost deliberate. No noise, just pure silence. The next morning, I showed the clips to my friend Jamie over coffee. He's more into hiking than weird stuff, but he nodded thoughtfully and said, "Maybe it's a drone or something." I thought that was possible, but the movements didn't feel mechanical, and drones don't usually hide in the fog like that. The nights after, I kept coming back, hoping to get better footage, maybe figure out what they were. Then things started feeling off. The first odd thing was the power flicker. It was subtle. One night, while I was editing the video on my laptop, the lights dimmed, then went out completely for about 10 seconds. Just my cabin, though. The whole street was fine. When the power came back, the laptop had frozen. It hadn't been plugged in, so the battery was fine. Just weird. I shrugged it off. Maybe a glitch. Then I noticed my phone acting strange. Battery draining faster than usual. GPS would shut off randomly, or the compass spun like crazy. It happened mostly around the lake. The night before the incident, I decided to sleep early. I was tired and figured I'd skip the usual late-night stakeout. I woke up around 3 a.m. to a sound at the door. I don't usually lock the porch door because it's screened, and no one ever comes around here at night, but this time I had. The sound wasn't a knock, exactly. More like a soft, dragging shuffle on the wooden porch. I got up, heart pounding, and peeked through the peephole. There was a man standing there. He was dressed in black, from head to toe, jacket, pants, boots. No hat, no gloves. His face was in shadow, but I could tell he was looking right at the door. He wasn't holding anything obvious, just standing still, like a statue. I didn't open the door, I just whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. I was about to call 911 when I noticed something on the porch floor. The man had dropped something. A photo. I cracked the door open just enough to reach down and pick it up. It was faded, yellowed at the edges, like it had been in a wallet for years. I looked at it, then looked back up. The man was gone. No footsteps in the dirt, no sign he'd walked away. The photo was of me. Not recent, though. It was a picture of me as a kid, maybe 6 or 7 years old. I'm standing in a park, smiling, wearing that blue jacket my mom bought me that winter. I turned the photo over, nothing written on the back. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I showed the photo to Jamie. He looked at it closely. "Where did you get this?" he asked. I told him what happened. He frowned. "That's unsettling." We both agreed not to tell anyone else. I was already feeling a little crazy. For the next few days, I kept watching for the man, but he never came back. I kept noticing strange things, though. My phone would light up with calls from unknown numbers. Never answered, never leaving a message. Lights on the lake still flickered, but now I felt like I was being watched, even when I was inside the cabin. One evening, I heard a soft tapping on the window, but when I looked, nothing was there. I started carrying a flashlight and pepper spray whenever I went outside, just in case. I don't know if the man was connected to the lights or the weird glitches. I don't know why he had that photo or what he wanted to tell me. All I know is, after that night, I started paying attention to things I hadn't before. The way the fog rolls in too quickly, the way the power sometimes blinks in half a house, the quiet moments when the world feels paused, like it's holding its breath. Sometimes when I look out over the lake at night, I think I see shapes moving just beyond the trees. And the photo, it's still on my desk right next to my camera. I haven't shown it to anyone else. Not yet. I was driving through the Mojave Desert late one night, trying to get from Las Vegas back to LA. My car was low on gas, and the sun had been down for hours. The highway stretched out in front of me, just dark asphalt cutting through the emptiness. with nothing but scrub and cacti on either side. I wasn't in a rush, but the silence and the vastness started to get to me after a while. Around 1 a.m., I spotted someone standing on the shoulder up ahead, waving like they needed help. At first, I thought it might be someone who'd broken down or needed a ride. It was odd because it was just miles of empty desert and no other cars in sight for a good stretch. The figure looked like a man, dressed in a black suit, standing completely still. When I got closer, I slowed down, ready to offer help or at least see what was going on. But as I passed, the guy didn't move his arms like someone waving for help. He just held his hand up, palm out like a rigid signal. His face was expressionless, almost blank. I couldn't make out details, but there was something off about him, like he wasn't fully there, or like he was watching me in a way that didn't feel human. I felt a chill despite the desert heat. I didn't stop. The moment I passed him, my GPS glitched hard. The screen flickered, then went black for a second, and when it came back on, the route had reset. Instead of continuing to LA, it redirected me back toward the same spot I'd just passed. I thought it was a glitch and tried to punch in my destination again, but every time I entered it, the GPS kept rerouting me in a loop, leading me right back to that stretch of highway, right where the man had been standing. I pulled over and shut off the car to check my phone for signal, but there was none. No bars, no Wi-Fi. It was like I'd been cut off from everything. I thought maybe the car's system was just acting up and rebooted it, but nothing changed. The GPS insisted on sending me back to that exact place. After sitting there for a few minutes, I noticed the desert had gone unnaturally quiet. No crickets, no wind, no cars, just silence. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, but the sky was clear and full of stars. I turned on my headlights and scanned the shoulder again. No one was there. No sign the man had ever been. I started to feel the edge of panic creeping in. Eventually, I forced myself to start driving again, ignoring the GPS. I took a side road I recognized from a map earlier, hoping it would get me out of the loop. Hours later, I checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town. I was exhausted and shaken, but told myself I was just tired and stressed. I tried to put it out of my head. Then, just after midnight, the phone in my room rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. A voice spoke on the other end. Calm, cold, and strangely calm. "You were right not to stop," it said. "Not everyone is." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a long time before hanging up. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, my GPS worked fine again. I left the motel, heading home, but I kept thinking about that figure on the side of the road, the loop, and the call. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I'm glad I didn't stop. The night shift on the rig was usually pretty quiet, nothing like the chaos you'd expect. It was just me and a couple of guys rotating through, keeping an eye on the equipment, logging data, and making sure everything ran smooth. I worked out in the Gulf of Mexico, on this offshore oil platform that's basically a tiny city in the middle of the ocean. You get used to the constant hum of the machines, the smell of salt and oil mixing in the air, and the endless stretch of dark water all around. It was late May, around midnight, and the weather was unusually calm. Usually there's at least a breeze cutting through, but that night the air was still, almost too still. The ocean surface looked like glass. I was up on the deck checking the gauges near the drilling tower when I noticed something off in the distance, near the horizon. At first it looked like a faint glow, pale blue, like the color of a deep pool under a nightlight. It was just a small spot, barely noticeable, but it was moving, slowly, and against the wind. That's what got my attention because the wind was steady out of the southwest, but this light was skimming east to west, almost like it was gliding right over the water's surface. I thought it might be one of those fishing boats with a weird light, or maybe a buoy with some kind of electrical fault, but no sound came with it. Usually, you'd hear a boat's engine or some sort of hum from machinery on the water, but this was silent. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on it. The light was about the size of a basketball, a perfect sphere, glowing softly, with no flicker or blinking. It skimmed across the surface with a smooth, fluid motion. No waves or ripples where it passed, which didn't make sense. Normally, anything moving on water that fast would leave a trail or disturb the surface. I called over one of the other guys, Jake, who was nearby on the platform. "Hey, you seeing this?" I said, pointing toward the light. Jake looked, squinted for a moment, and nodded. "What the hell? That's not a boat, is it?" "No idea," I said. "It's moving against the wind, and I don't hear a thing." We watched in silence for maybe 5 minutes as the sphere glided steadily across the water, keeping a low altitude just above the surface. The water below looked completely undisturbed. No wakes, no splashes, nothing. It was eerie how clean the path was. Then suddenly, the sphere shot straight up. I mean, it accelerated faster than anything I'd ever seen, like it disappeared in a flash. No noise, no ripple, just a blur of pale blue light that vanished in the black sky. Jake blinked and rubbed his eyes. "Did that just happen?" "Yeah," I said. My heart was pounding. I pulled out my phone to check the time. It was 12:43 a.m. We spent the next half hour scanning the horizon, but there was no sign of the light or any other strange activity. The ocean was still calm, the sky clear, with stars bright and steady. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe it was a trick of the light, some reflection from the rig, or maybe a distant flare from another platform. But nothing added up. The next day, when I brought it up during the morning shift, most of the guys shrugged it off. "Must have been a fishing buoy or a flare," someone said. But I knew what I saw. Later that week, I checked the radar logs and the marine traffic reports for that night. No vessels were recorded in that area at the time. The radar showed a few small fishing boats miles away, nothing near where I saw the light. I even asked the Coast Guard if they had any reports, but they told me everything was normal. A few days after the sighting, the platform sensors started acting weird during night shifts. Random static on the comms, equipment glitches, brief power fluctuations. Nothing that caused downtime, but enough to make everyone uneasy. One night, Jake and I tried to replicate the moment, looking out for the light again. The ocean wasn't quite as calm as before, and the sphere never showed up. I still don't know what it was. I've been out here on the rig for years, seen a lot of strange weather and weird marine stuff, but that glowing sphere moving over the water against the wind, then disappearing straight up, that was something else. No one else I talked to has reported anything like it, and I can't explain how it moved without disturbing the water or making a sound. It's been on my mind ever since, that pale blue glow cutting across the ocean like it didn't belong to this world. I was flying a routine cargo leg from Salt Lake City to Sacramento. Just me in a Cessna Citation Excel. Empty cabin except for a couple of pallets of small freight. Nothing sensitive. Light load. We'd had a late departure because of weather in Reno, but the skies were smooth by the time I leveled off at 40,000 feet, somewhere over northern Nevada. I was on autopilot, sipping bad coffee from a thermos, monitoring the radios. It was about 2:30 in the morning. I'd flown this route dozens of times, usually alone, sometimes with a co-pilot depending on the contract. That night, it was just me and it was quiet. No traffic on frequency besides a commercial flight way up north, heading to Seattle, and center was barely talking. Somewhere west of Battle Mountain, I noticed a light off my left side. At first, I thought it was another aircraft passing opposite direction, high altitude, maybe trans-Pacific, but the position lights were all wrong. There were no red or green nav lights, no strobes, just a dull silver-white glow, round but not beaming. It looked almost like sunlight catching on metal, but the moon was behind me, and it wasn't bright enough for a reflection like that. I watched it for maybe 10 seconds before it clicked that it was moving with me. Not toward or away, but with me. Same heading, same speed, same altitude. That got my attention real fast. I leaned forward, checked the TCAS, nothing, no targets. I called Oakland Center just to be sure. "Center, Citation 73 X-ray at 400. Do you have any traffic just off my 9 o'clock? They came back a few seconds later. "Negative, 73 X-ray. You're the only one in that sector." I asked again, clarified that I was seeing something pacing me off the left side. They asked for position, heading, altitude, all the usual. I gave it. They said again, calm as ever, "We don't show any traffic within 50 miles. Can you identify the object?" I couldn't. The thing was still off my wing, not close enough to be dangerous, maybe a quarter mile out, but it held perfect formation with me. That's not easy at 450 knots, and it didn't wobble or drift like a balloon or drone. It was steady, effortless. It wasn't shaped like a plane, more like an elongated oval. No wings, no tail, just smooth silver like liquid metal. No seams, no rivets, no markings. It didn't glow, but it caught light in a way that made it look faintly luminous. I don't really know how to explain it. It didn't cast light, it just was light somehow. I watched it for another 30 seconds, then another. Still no movement. It was like it had locked onto me and was just studying. I was about to call center again when it vanished. It didn't bank away or speed up or drop. It just blinked out. One frame it was there, the next it wasn't. No streak, no sound, just gone. Like someone cut a hole out of the sky and patched it back in. I sat there gripping the yoke, heart going fast. I don't scare easy in the air, but this was something else. I scanned everywhere. Sky, radar, horizon, nothing. The air was still smooth. Autopilot held steady. All systems nominal. Center came back on, asked if I still had visual. I said no. They didn't seem surprised, just acknowledged and said they'd file a report. The rest of the flight was uneventful. I landed at Mather just after 3:15. Ramp was quiet. I didn't say anything to the ground crew, just signed the log and went to the hotel. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing keeping pace with me, smooth and silent, like it was listening. Or waiting. I checked the logs next day. No military activity in the area. No NOTAMs, no weather balloons. I tried pulling the flight data off the onboard recorder, but there was nothing unusual. No transponder returns besides me. No TCAS warnings, nothing. But I know what I saw, and whatever it wasn't supposed to be there. It started sometime in March. I wasn't sleeping well to begin with. Stress, work, whatever. I'd go to bed around 10, then just lie there for hours. And when I did fall asleep, it was always the same dream. I was floating, not flying, not falling, just suspended, like my body wasn't mine. I couldn't move, couldn't turn my head or wiggle my fingers. I was face up, weightless, like I was underwater, but there was no pressure, no sound, just this sterile, bright space that seemed to stretch out in every direction. The ceiling, if you could call it that, looked like glowing panels, almost like a hospital, but too clean, too symmetrical. Every time I felt like I was being looked at. I couldn't see anyone, but I knew there were things near me. Sometimes I'd catch shadows in the edge of my vision, tall shapes, unmoving. They never touched me, but I always woke up with this electric tension in my jaw, like I'd been clenching all night. I live in a duplex outside of Boise. Suburban edge of town, quiet street. I'm on the left side and my neighbor Glenn lives on the right. We mostly just say hi when bringing the garbage out. I only mention him because of what happened later. The dreams went on every night for almost 2 weeks. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was scared, just because it sounded ridiculous. I figured maybe it was sleep paralysis, or some new kind of insomnia. But I started noticing other things. Lights flickering, always in the hallway. The bulb in the ceiling fixture would dim for a second, just barely, like a power dip, but it never happened during the day. Only at night, only after the dream. And there were these little scratches near the baseboards in my bedroom. Not like animal scratches, I don't have pets, but faint, evenly spaced marks, running parallel along the wall, maybe 6 inches from the floor. I tried cleaning them off with a Mr. Clean pad, but they didn't go away. Then there was the noise. I'd wake up sometime between 2 and 3 a.m., lying on my side, and hear this low hum. Not outside, not from the heater or fridge. It was like it was in the air. You could almost feel it more than hear it. Not loud, but constant, like a tuning fork pressed to bone. It made my teeth feel weird. One night I woke up and realized I was lying perfectly flat, arms at my sides, palms down. That's not how I sleep. I always curl up or flip to my stomach. But this time I was just laid out like a plank, eyes wide open, the ceiling light bulb flickering slightly. That hum was louder than usual, almost vibrating the pillow. I sat up fast, heart pounding. The noise stopped, the light stabilized. I didn't go back to sleep. A couple mornings later, I was outside watering the small planter by the driveway, and Glenn came out to grab his paper. He looked like hell, pale, sweaty, dark rings under his eyes. "Rough night?" I asked. He paused, then kind of laughed, but not in a funny way. You ever have, like, really vivid dreams? He said. That made my stomach twist. I asked what he meant. Floating, he said, every night for the past couple weeks. Bright white room. Can't move. Just floating. Something's always there, but I can't see it. I don't know how to explain it. I keep waking up feeling wrong. I didn't say anything. I must have just stared at him too long, because then he shook his head and said, "Forget it," and turned to go back inside. I followed him, put my hand on his shoulder, told him I'd had the exact same dream. He froze, then sat down on the steps and started crying, like full-on sobbing. I didn't know what to do, just sat beside him and waited. Eventually, he said, "I thought I was losing my mind." He told me about the hum, the static in the walls, the way his clocks kept blinking like the power had gone out, except they were on separate circuits. He'd woken up in the backyard once, barefoot, no coat, freezing, had no idea how he got there. That night we made a plan. Nothing dramatic, just decided we'd both try to stay awake, see if anything happened. Glenn had an old security camera he used to point at his driveway. He said he'd set it up facing his bed. I downloaded a sleep tracking app that took audio recordings whenever it detected noise. We each took half a melatonin, stayed up watching a movie, then went to our own sides around midnight. I didn't remember falling asleep. I just remember being in that same blank space, stiff and paralyzed, staring upward. I wanted to scream, but my jaw wouldn't work. I couldn't even blink. Something tall moved past me, not walking, but gliding. And then the hum ramped up until it wasn't sound anymore, just pure pressure behind my eyes. When I woke up, the sun was already up. 9:30 a.m., I grabbed my phone and opened the sleep app. It had one recording, time-stamped 3:17 a.m. I hit play. It was silent for a few seconds, then there was a metallic click. Then a low, rising hum, same as the one I'd heard before, but louder, more layered. Then a soft voice, but not in English. I couldn't even tell if it was a language. It sounded like whispers run backward through a synth. Then the file just cut off. I ran next door. Glenn opened the door already pale. He didn't sleep either. He said he came to on the floor of his kitchen, shirt inside out. He hadn't been drinking. The camera in his bedroom had turned itself off at 3:16 a.m., but it did save one frame, a still shot. It was mostly dark, just grain from the infrared sensor. But you could see his bed, empty. The covers were pulled down neatly. In the corner of the frame, there was a shape, not a person, too thin, too tall. The top of its head was flat, no facial features. The arms were long and slightly bent. It was in the room, but it looked wrong, like it wasn't fully there, like it was bleeding through or glitching. We stared at that image for a long time. Then Glenn deleted it. We didn't talk much after that. We still wave, still say hi, but we don't bring it up. I haven't had the dream since the last time. Neither has he. But the hum comes back sometimes. Always for just a second, like just as I'm drifting off, like a reminder. My wife, Becca, and I have a little cabin in northern Minnesota. Not full-time, it's just a place we go on weekends when we can. It's out past two harbors, tucked into the woods off a dirt road that barely shows up on GPS. My dad and I built it when I was 20, mostly as a hunting shack, but we fixed it up over the years, insulated it, added solar, got a little well pump going, real basic, but cozy. We don't get cell service out there. That's part of the appeal. This happened last September. It was one of the last weekends before the weather turned. Leaves were already changing, cold at night but warm during the day. We drove up Friday after work, arrived a little after dark. I got the fire going while Becca unpacked groceries. Same routine as always. That night, we were sitting out on the porch, just listening. The woods up there get quiet in a way you don't get near town. No traffic, no dogs barking, just wind in the trees, the occasional owl. But around 11, we started hearing something else. Not animal sounds, more like snapping, like someone stepping on sticks, then stopping, then another snap, maybe 50 feet away. I stood up and shone the flashlight around, but we didn't see anything. I figured maybe a deer or porcupine. But Becca got nervous. She hates not knowing what's out there, so I walked the tree line with the light. Didn't find anything, but the feeling stuck with us, like something was watching. The next morning, we found our trail cam in the dirt. We'd set it up a few weeks before to see what kind of wildlife came through. It was one of those motion-triggered ones, strapped to a birch about 15 feet from the cabin. It hadn't fallen, the strap had been unbuckled, like someone had taken it off on purpose and just dropped it. I figured it was a bear. They're curious. Maybe it pawed at the latch. But there were no scratches, no mud, no teeth marks. The camera wasn't even dirty. We brought it inside, turned it on, battery was fine, storage card was full. So I plugged it into my laptop. There were 86 clips from that night. The first few were what you'd expect. Trees moving, a rabbit hopping by, nothing weird. But then at 11:13 p.m., the screen went black. Not like darkness, more like corrupted video. Static bars, weird pixelation, total nonsense. That lasted through clip after clip. Nearly 2 hours of unreadable footage. Except for one. It was maybe 30 seconds long. Time-stamped 12:42 a.m. It looked like it was shot inside the cabin. It was our bed. I recognized the flannel sheets, the old headboard. Becca and I were both asleep. The angle was low from the foot of the bed, like the camera had been placed on the floor. We weren't moving, just breathing slow like we were out cold. And behind the camera, barely visible at the top edge of the frame, there was something standing, just a sliver of it. Not the whole shape. You could see what looked like ears curled around the top of the camera, long and pale. They weren't human. The joints bent wrong. There were too many of them. I scrubbed the timeline back and forth. No sound, no movement. Just that one still frame, like the video froze. Then the file ended. I didn't show Becca right away. I closed the laptop back and made up some excuse about the footage being corrupted. But she could tell something was wrong. That afternoon, she found the file and watched it herself. I heard her in the bedroom. She didn't scream or anything, just went totally silent. When I came in, she was already packing. We left within the hour. Didn't even lock up. Just drove back to Duluth and stayed at her sister's place. For a few days, we didn't talk about it. Neither of us wanted to bring it up. But then the dreams started. I'd wake up with this buzzing in my head, like low static. Couldn't remember what I'd been dreaming, just felt like I hadn't slept. Once I woke up standing in the hallway, still holding my pillow. Another time I had mud on my feet. No idea how it got there. Becca had it worse. She started getting nosebleeds at night. Always between 2 and 3 a.m. She'd wake up dizzy, arms numb. One time she swore she saw light coming in through the ceiling. Like a flashlight, but bluish and totally silent. I told her we needed to see a doctor. She said she didn't want to, that she knew it wouldn't help. I finally went back up to the cabin 2 weeks later. Alone. I needed to see if someone had broken in. Maybe a prank or a break-in. That's what I told myself. The front door was still locked. Nothing inside was touched. No broken windows. No signs of animals. The weird part was the trail cam was back on the tree. Same strap, same height, just reattached like it had never been moved. But the SD card was missing. I looked for hours, dug through the grass, checked the cabin, even pulled apart the firewood stack. Nothing. When I left, I got this tight pressure behind my eyes, like a sinus headache, but worse. It stayed with me the whole drive home. Only went away when I crossed back onto the highway. We haven't gone back since. The cabin's still there, far as I know. I check the weather station online sometimes, and the power's still working. Solar's charging, but we don't talk about it anymore. The laptop we used, the one with the video files, stopped booting a few months later. I brought it to a shop, and they said the hard drive had been wiped. No idea how. I don't know what we saw in that video. I don't know what was in our room or how the camera got in there. But the angle was too low for a person standing. And whatever those fingers were, they weren't human. They were something else. I was out behind the house around midnight, same as most clear nights that year. I'd gotten into amateur astronomy pretty heavy after I moved out to Green Springs. Not much to do out there besides stargaze and fix things that shouldn't be broken yet. The skies were some of the darkest in the state. No light pollution, just endless stars. It's the one thing I liked about that place. I'd set up the Dobsonian on the back deck, pointed south. I was doing some casual observation, nothing too technical, just scanning Cygnus for double stars, messing around. I remember it was one of those rare nights where the air was perfectly still, no wind at all. Even the pine trees on the ridge line weren't moving. The crickets had gone quiet, which I only noticed later. I was leaning over the scope with my red flashlight clipped to my hoodie when I noticed something was off. Not in the eyepiece, just with the stars themselves. A patch of sky near Deneb looked wrong. At first I thought maybe there was a low cloud or some high-altitude haze, but the weather had been bone dry all week. The stars in that area weren't dim, they were just gone, like someone had taken an eraser to that part of the sky. It wasn't shaped like a cloud either, it was too clean. A long, horizontal oval, blacker than black. Not shimmering or glowing, just solid, like a cutout. It was moving slow, left to right across the sky. I remember blinking a few times to make sure it wasn't my vision. It moved silently, steady as anything. No lights, no trail, just this shape blotting out the densest part of the Milky Way like it didn't belong there. I stepped away from the scope and stood at the edge of the deck to get a better view with the naked eye. Whatever it was, it didn't reflect anything, not starlight, not ambient light from the horizon. It was like looking at a hole in space. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds before I realized I was holding my breath. It felt wrong, somehow. Not scary, exactly. More like a pressure in my chest, like my body wanted to freeze up even though nothing was happening. Then the shape paused. Mid-glide, it just stopped. That's when I noticed how quiet everything was. No insects, no rustling, no distant barking from the houses down the slope. Just this blanket of silence and the weird hum in my ears, like I'd stood up too fast. The blackout shape hovered there for another 10 seconds or so, then shifted. Not forward, down. The way it moved wasn't right. It didn't descend like a plane or a balloon. It just repositioned, instantly, but not abruptly. Like the space it was in changed, not the object itself. That's the only way I can describe it. It stayed low for maybe 5 more seconds, then started gliding again, but this time toward me, slowly, still silent. No wind, no displacement. I remember backing up until I was standing inside the doorframe of the kitchen, still staring at it through the screen. I could see it moving above the ridge, blotting out more stars as it passed. Big. Maybe football field size, but it was hard to tell with no lights or structure to go by. Just a moving shadow. Maisie, my neighbor's dog, started barking 2 houses over. Then she went quiet mid-bark. Not like she stopped, like something cut her off. The power went out a few seconds after that. I heard the fridge click off behind me and the porch light died. I was in complete darkness except for the stars. I remember stepping out again slowly, eyes adjusted now, and the thing was right above me. No lights. No detail. Just a void blotting out half the sky. It wasn't directly overhead, off to the right, maybe 100 feet up, lower than any plane had business being. Still no sound, still no wind. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like a full minute. Then it moved again. Same weird way. Not flying, just changing position. It shifted back toward the ridge and rose higher, gaining altitude in a straight vertical line, like it was done. I watched it until it disappeared into the stars again, just blended back into the sky like it had never been there. A few seconds later, the porch light flicked back on. The fridge hummed. Crickets started chirping again, all at once. I stood there another few minutes, then locked everything up and went to bed without brushing my teeth. Next morning, I checked the local weather logs to see if maybe a weird cloud formation could explain it. Nothing. Skies had been clear all night. I even pulled the footage from my trail camera, but it only caught static between 12:02 and 12:11 a.m. I didn't go out again for a week. When I finally did, I couldn't bring myself to look up. Pulled off I-90 just past Missoula, eastbound. It was one of those unmarked gravel pullouts with a view of nothing but pine and sky. July, mid-afternoon, temperature hovering around 97. My logbook was full for the day, and my eyes had been doing that flutter-close thing for the last 30 miles, so I parked the rig, killed the engine, and climbed into the sleeper to grab 30 minutes. I remember checking my watch before laying down, 2:41 p.m. Set an alarm for 3:10. I always set it 29 minutes exactly. Keeps me from falling too deep, too fast. I've done this routine 100 times. Felt like I closed my eyes for maybe 5 seconds. Then I opened them and everything was weirdly quiet. The truck was cold. Not just cooler than before, cold. I hadn't turned on the AC. The cab lights were off. My phone was black. For a second, I thought the battery died, but when I clicked it on, the home screen said 4:08 p.m. That didn't make sense. My alarm never went off, and I never sleep longer than 30. I checked my wristwatch. Same time, 4:08. Exactly 1 hour and 27 minutes gone. Still half asleep, I thought maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe I forgot to set the alarm or dismissed it in my sleep. But I sat there staring at my phone like it owed me an explanation. I couldn't shake the feeling something was off, like waking up in a room you don't recognize, even though it's yours. Then I noticed the smell. Not bad exactly. Not like smoke or gas, just this sharp metallic tang in the air like the inside of a brand new radiator. And the cab lights still wouldn't come on. I tried the overhead and the dome, nothing. Battery indicator was fine. Engine turned over normally. I got out to stretch my legs, thinking I must have been more exhausted than I realized. The sun was lower than I expected. Sky, that kind of orange-pink you only get in Montana. I walked around the rig once, just to be sure everything looked right. Trailer doors still locked, tires fine, no signs of anything tampered with, but I kept feeling watched. I know how that sounds, but you spend enough time on the road, alone, in middle of nowhere spots. You learn to trust your gut, that tight feeling at the back of your neck, that pause before turning your back to the trees. I scanned the tree line, maybe 30 yards back from the gravel shoulder. It was dense, mostly pine with some scrub sloped upward toward a ridge. Sunlight filtered through but didn't really light anything. Shadows were long, flickering in the wind, except there wasn't wind. Not even a breeze. No movement in the branches. No birds. No bugs. I don't think I've ever heard Montana so quiet in July. Then I saw something move. Low, just past a deadfall, maybe knee-high. Thought it was an animal at first. A raccoon or a coyote. But it didn't move like that. It was smooth. Almost too smooth. I only caught it for a second before it slipped behind a stump, but something about it didn't register right. I stepped closer to the shoulder, trying to get a better look. That's when I saw the others. 3 of them. Low to the ground, maybe 2 feet tall, spaced apart but moving in sync, like they were flanking something. I couldn't make out faces or details, just small, pale figures half concealed by branches. They weren't walking, more like gliding just above the forest floor. No footsteps, no noise. I froze. My brain kept trying to file them under something familiar. Deer fawns, hikers' kids, pranksters, but nothing fit. The way they moved didn't feel right. No bobbing or shifting, just this straight, steady glide. All 3 turned at the same time, like they knew I was watching. I backed toward the cab, keeping my eyes on the woods. The second I reached for the door handle, my headlights turned on by themselves. High beams. No one in the driver's seat. No one around. The lights flooded the trees and the figures were gone. Just empty forest again. I climbed in and shut the door, locked it, and sat there gripping the steering wheel like an idiot. I kept the engine off and didn't touch anything. I didn't even want to breathe loud. I don't scare easy, but I wasn't about to go wandering into the woods to prove I'd imagined it. After maybe 5 minutes, I got the nerve to start the engine. Everything lit up normally. Dash readouts, GPS, AC, all working. My phone buzzed like it just got service back. No new notifications. I pulled back onto the interstate and drove for 2 straight hours before stopping again. Later that night at a pilot off I-15, I checked my dash cam. I always leave it rolling, even when parked. But that afternoon, from 2:42 to 4:09, it was just static. No video, no error message. File was there, just empty noise. Every other day, before and after, was fine. I thought about telling dispatch, thought about calling someone, but what do you say? Hey, I lost track of time and saw some kids floating in the woods. Didn't seem like the kind of thing you could file a report about. I marked that stretch on my map. Don't stop there anymore. Doesn't matter how tired I am, I'd rather pull off 20 miles further or drive through the night. I kept the dashcam file. Still have it somewhere. Sounds stupid, but sometimes I play it back hoping maybe there's something I missed. A shape, a sound, anything. But it's just static. I was stationed at a small radar facility outside Minot, North Dakota back in 2006. Not the main Air Force base. This was one of those satellite installations nobody really talks about. Just 3 concrete buildings, a perimeter fence, and a bunch of radio towers pointing every direction. Most nights were dead quiet. Snow half the year, wind the rest. I was 27, ex-Navy, working contract as a comms tech. The kind of job where you sit in a chair for 12 hours and maybe get up twice, just monitoring systems, checking logs, keeping everything running. 4 of us on rotation, 2 inside the ops trailer, 2 in the maintenance building. Nights were usually just me and a guy named Cole Varga. He was older, Army background, I think, quiet type. Never talked about himself unless you asked directly. The first time it happened, I didn't even notice. It was late January, around 2 a.m., and we were midway through a blizzard warning. Visibility was crap. I was logging routine static bursts on one of the long-range bands when Cole came in from his smoke break looking weird. He stood by the door, brushing snow off his jacket, and said, "You feel that?" I said, "Feel what?" He looked out the window, then glanced at the wall clock. "Never mind," he said. "Happens sometimes, usually Wednesdays." I thought he was just messing with me. Guys get bored, say weird stuff. But the next week, same shift, same time, he asked again, "You hear anything?" I said no, just the wind. He shook his head. Shouldn't even be that. He told me without looking up from his screen that every Wednesday at 2:13 a.m., the sky above the site went quiet. That was the word he used. Not dark, not empty, quiet. Like the whole thing, stars, clouds, satellites, got turned off for a few seconds. Said it started after some equipment was swapped out in late 2004. New tower, new dish. No explanation. I asked what he meant by quiet, and he said, "You'll know it when it happens." Third week, I stepped outside to check the tower lights like I was supposed to. It was cold enough to freeze the hair inside your nose, so I didn't linger. But just as I turned back toward the door, I realized the wind had stopped. Like, completely. I looked up, the stars were gone. All of them, no clouds, no haze, just black. It wasn't overcast, it was like someone put a lid over the sky. I held my breath, listening. No hum from the towers, no rustle from the snow-covered grass. Even the power lines weren't buzzing. Just this crushing silence, like being deep underwater. It lasted maybe 5 or 6 seconds. Then everything came back. Wind hit my face, antennas whined. A few stars reappeared. I went back inside. Cole didn't say anything at first. Then he looked up from his coffee and said, "See what I mean?" I didn't know what to say. I told him maybe it was cloud cover. He laughed once and said, "Clouds don't kill EM bleed. Not like that." The next few weeks, I started checking the time. I'd go outside around 2:10 every Wednesday just to see, and it happened. Not always the same, but close enough. Once, all the exterior lights dimmed like a brownout, but only for a few seconds. Another time, I saw a shape, long and flat, blocking out the stars directly above the far tower. No sound, no movement, then gone. By March, I started noticing other things. One night, the seismic sensors we had buried behind the generator shed registered 3 massive pressure spikes, like something enormous passed overhead at low altitude. Nothing visual, just that same dead silence and then a return to normal. Cole marked the logs like usual, but didn't flag it. He said, "Command doesn't want it flagged." I asked who told him that, and he just shrugged. People up the chain. April, we had a systems check scheduled during that window. Base wanted a full diagnostic of the dish relays, so we had both of us in the ops trailer watching signal returns. Right on time, 2:13, all outbound frequencies spiked into the red for about 4 seconds. Incoming dropped to 0. Just a flat line across every band. Then the screens blinked twice and reset like nothing happened. Cole leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "That's new," he said. That same night, the backup clocks jumped forward by 3 minutes. Main clock stayed the same. GPS sync showed no error. But I watched the digital readouts change. Not slowly, not a glitch. Just straight from 2:14 to 2:17. We had to recalibrate them manually. Cole logged it, but again, no flags. The weirdest part came in late May. It was still cold, snow melting off in patches, and I'd gotten in the habit of bringing a camera out during those early morning checks. Just a basic DSLR with night mode. That night, I set it on a tripod near the eastern fence. Pointing straight up, I triggered a 10-second exposure at exactly 2:12:50 a.m. After the silence passed, I went back to check the shot. Looked normal at first. Then I zoomed in. There was something faint near the center. Not a dot, not a streak, more like a smudge, like a shadow burned into the image. Long and wide and slightly curved, no lights, no definition, but it was there. I tried another shot, same angle, nothing. I showed it to Cole the next night. He stared at it for a long time and said, "You keep that off any network, just in case." June was my last month there. I'd already put in my transfer papers. I didn't tell anyone outside the site about what I'd seen. Not because I thought it was classified, but because I didn't know how to explain it. You start trying to describe silence to someone who's never heard real silence, and they just nod along. My last Wednesday shift, I went out early. Sat on the hood of the truck with a thermos and watched the sky. At 2:13, everything stopped again. Not just sound, movement, wind, insects. Even the clouds that had been slowly drifting west just paused. I looked straight up, and I swear for a second I saw it. Not the shape, but the absence. A part of the sky that didn't match the rest, like a patch of different black, darker somehow. Then it moved, sliding west without making a sound, and the world came back online. I didn't say anything to Cole, just went back inside and finished my shift. A week later, I was in Seattle, working IT at a drone testing facility. Nothing strange ever happened there. I still have the photo. Kept it on a USB drive, never uploaded. The camera's long gone. I don't show it to people, it doesn't prove anything, just a blur against a black sky. But every once in a while, when I wake up around 2 in the morning, I step outside and look up, and I listen. It started around 10:30 at night, maybe closer to 11. I was driving back from my uncle's place in Monroe, heading toward my apartment in Athens. Normally, I'd take the main highway, but I'd had a couple beers with him and didn't want to risk any attention from troopers, so I took the back roads. I know the area pretty well. A lot of old farm roads, long stretches between intersections, not many streetlights. The road I was on, County Road 217, winds through some pretty empty country. Old chicken farms, some abandoned houses, maybe a trailer or two tucked back in the trees. No shoulder to speak of and just barely 2 lanes wide. It was cool out, but not cold. Early October. Windows down a bit, radio off. I was just cruising along, kind of zoning out. That's when I noticed headlights behind me. They were far back at first, just a soft glow around the bends. I figured someone else had taken the same shortcut and was catching up. I kept my speed at 45. The road was posted at 40, but nobody drives it that slow. Every now and then, the lights would dip as the car went over a hill or around a curve, then come back again. I didn't think anything of it at first, but then I started noticing how steady they were. No weaving, no bouncing, just locked onto me. Same distance, same brightness. No turn signals, no flickering, just smooth and steady. I tapped my brakes once, just a little, to see if they'd slow down too. They didn't. I kept driving. A few minutes passed. The road was getting narrower, no more houses, just woods on either side. I started getting that prickly feeling on the back of my neck, like when you know someone's watching you. So I figured I'd pull off at the next gravel driveway or pasture gate. Let them pass. I saw it turn off on the right, one of those grass clearings with a rusted cattle gate, and slowed down. I eased onto the shoulder, angled the car like I was pulling in, and waited. I kept one eye on the mirror, but nothing came around the bend. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, engine idling, headlights pointing into the trees. I thought maybe they'd turned off somewhere without me noticing, but that didn't make sense. There weren't any other roads for miles. I backed out slowly, angled my car to look behind me down the road. It was empty. No headlights, no taillights, no engine sounds, nothing. I sat there with my foot on the brake, staring at the empty curve behind me. It was too tight for anyone to have turned off without me hearing gravel or seeing dust. I would have noticed. I drove another few miles, slower this time. My eyes kept going to the mirror. The road felt darker, like the trees had closed in somehow. I turned the radio on just to have some sound. Static. Flipped through the presets. Nothing but white noise. That part of Georgia's got spotty reception, but usually I can get at least one country station. Nothing came in. I reached a small intersection, 4-way stop with a blinking yellow, and waited a bit longer than I needed to. Just sat there with my blinker on, checking the mirror again. Still nothing. But right as I turned left onto the next stretch, I thought I saw something in the rear view. Not headlights this time, just a shape, like a pale blur in the road. I slowed down again, checked the mirror, it was gone. Another few minutes passed, then the road started climbing. This section's steep, maybe 100 feet of elevation, then it levels out near an old silo that collapsed a few years back. As I crested the hill, I saw lights behind me again, same exact spacing, same soft glow, like they'd never left. My heart jumped a little. I wasn't even sure if I'd seen them at first, but there they were. No engine noise, no dust, just those two pale lights hovering in the curve behind me. I kept going. I didn't pull over this time. I wanted to be done. About a mile ahead was a T-junction with a small church, Oakfield Missionary. I figured I'd turn in, get out, see if they kept going. Worst case, maybe it was just some kid messing around. I pulled into the lot and turned off the ignition. My dome light came on. I cracked the door and stood next to the car, listening. Silence. The road behind me was empty again. I walked to the edge of the lot, gravel crunching under my boots, and looked both ways. The trees swayed a little in the breeze. Nothing else moved. I stood there for a while, feeling stupid. Then I heard gravel shifting across the road. Not from behind, from across the intersection, other side of the tree line. Just a single crunch, like a step. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing answered. I got back in the car, locked the doors, and started driving again. This time, I didn't stop. Even when I saw the lights again 5 minutes later, they didn't get closer. Just stayed back there, always the same distance. The last stretch before town is a long downhill with open fields on both sides. As soon as I came over the ridge and saw the glow of Athens ahead, the lights behind me vanished. Not faded, vanished. 1 second they were there, next they weren't. I pulled into the Waffle House on Epps Bridge, sat in the lot for 20 minutes drinking a Coke. My hands were shaking a little. There was no car behind me, no other headlights on that road the whole time I drove it, just mine. And those. Whatever they were. I've taken that route dozens of times. I still do, now and then. But I haven't seen those lights again. And I don't stop anymore. I was assigned to the Lordsburg station, out in New Mexico, which covers a stretch of the high desert west of Las Cruces. That was back in 2016. Most of our shifts were long and quiet, just miles of sand and scrub with the occasional group coming through or a busted truck we had to check out. My name's Ramon Diaz. I'd been on the job about 6 years at that point. I worked mostly nights, running surveillance from the mobile towers or monitoring the FLIR feeds back at base. Nothing fancy. A couple pan-tilt zoom cameras mounted on extendable masts, tied to thermal and IR. We'd park them on ridges and let them scan the desert in wide arcs. This happened mid-July, around 2 a.m. It was one of those nights where the heat never really dropped. High 80s even after midnight. No breeze, just the kind of dry air that sticks in your throat. I was out with my partner, Alex Trujillo. We were manning one of the forward towers up near Animas. Pretty flat land out there, broken up by low ridges and arroyos. Nothing but creosote and hard-packed sand as far as you could see. We'd set the tower up around dusk and parked the truck in a cut just below it. Most of the night was uneventful. A few jackrabbits, a small group trying to move northeast. We called it in. A team picked them up easy. After that, it went dead quiet again. Around 2:10, I was watching the IR feed while Alex was in the truck catching some rest. The camera was scanning east low on the horizon, just tracing the slope of a shallow wash. Then it pinged something, a heat source, coming up slow out of the dark. I figured coyote at first, or maybe a mule deer, but it wasn't right. Whatever it was standing, upright, walking, and it was hot, not body temp warm, but white hot on the feed, like it had just come out of an oven. At first, it was just a shimmer in the distance, hard to make out, but as it moved closer, maybe 200 yards from the lens, the shape became clearer. 2 arms, 2 legs, head forward. Human-shaped, no question, but off. The proportions were wrong, legs too long, arms hanging low, and it didn't move like a person. No sway, no bounce, just smooth. I tried to lock the camera, but the auto track froze. Screen flickered for a second. When it came back, it was closer, way closer. It had covered 100 yards in what couldn't have been more than 2 seconds. I backed out of the zoom thinking the system was glitching. I checked our secondary feed, the wide angle. Nothing there. The regular night vision cam wasn't picking it up, only IR. I radioed Alex to get up. I said, "You need to come look at this." He didn't answer right away, so I ran back to the truck, maybe 30 feet from the base of the tower. He was sitting up, rubbing his face. I told him something was out there, someone or something walking in fast from the South Wash. He followed me to the monitor, but by the time we got back, it was gone. Just gone. We rewound the feed. There it was. The shape moving up from the edge of the frame, heat signature glowing like steel. Then, just before it would have come into full view of the secondary cam, it stopped. It crouched. That was the only way I can describe it. Like a squat. Then the image warped for a split second, like static. Next frame, nothing. It didn't walk away. It didn't fall. Just wasn't there. Alex thought I was screwing with him. I told him to check the system logs. They were clean. No errors, no loss of signal. We stepped outside and scanned the desert with binoculars. Nothing. Dead quiet. No wind, no bugs. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I decided to check the area where the thing appeared, maybe 300 yards from the tower. Took the truck, drove slow. We had thermal scopes, side-mounted lights. The ground was flat, hard-packed, no brush tall enough to hide behind. No footprints, not even disturbed sand. We did a full perimeter sweep, nothing turned up. We spent the rest of the shift watching that stretch, eyes glued to the screen. The IR was working fine, picked up rabbits, even a snake slithering out of a bush, but nothing even close to what we'd seen before. Next day, I pulled the recording and tagged it for review. Our supervisor Harris watched it once, then just nodded and said he'd send it up the chain. He didn't ask for details, didn't look surprised, didn't mention it again. A week later, I checked the archive. That clip was gone. Whole night's footage labeled as corrupted. Same with the backup drive. That was the last time I worked with that tower. Alex put in for a transfer 2 months later. He didn't say why, but I knew. We didn't talk about it again. Neither of us ever told it outside the station. But I still think about that shape, the way it moved. Like it wasn't made for our terrain, but was using it anyway, just for a little while. We were camping up near the Tarryall Mountains in Colorado. Me, Sean, Greg, and Chris. All 4 of us had taken Friday off work and drove up early to claim a good spot. It was late September, right after the leaves started turning, but before it got cold enough to snow. We parked a little ways off a dirt road that runs through Pike National Forest, hiked in maybe half a mile, and set up camp near a shallow ridge overlooking a valley. It wasn't a campground or anything official, just a clearing we'd found years back that we kept coming back to. No cell signal, no people. Just wind in the trees and the sound of your own boots. By the time we got the tents up and a fire going, it was already dark. We made dinner, passed around a bottle of bourbon, told the usual stories. Sean brought his Bluetooth speaker and was playing old Wilco stuff at low volume. We all turned in around midnight. Clear sky, cold air. You could see every star. I woke up around 3:30. I know the time because I checked my watch. I had to piss and my sleeping bag was too hot. The fire was just embers by then, and everything was quiet. No wind, no bugs. Just that kind of mountain stillness that feels a little too perfect when you notice it. I stepped out of the tent and walked a little uphill, past where we'd stacked the bear bags, to a flat rock we always used as a lookout. You could see the whole ridge to the west from there, and parts of the forest sloping down into the valley. It was colder than I expected. My breath came out heavy. That's when I noticed the light. It wasn't moving, just hovering above the ridge, maybe a quarter mile away, right above the tree line. Soft white, but not like a spotlight or a plane. It was more uniform. A kind of round glow, almost like a sphere, but not perfectly shaped. No beam, no flicker, just hanging there, completely still. I thought it might be a drone at first, but there was no sound, not even a hum, and it was way too big. Hard to judge the exact size at that distance, but it had to be at least the size of a car, maybe bigger. I watched it for a solid minute. It didn't move, didn't dim, didn't pulse, just sat there above the ridge like it was waiting. I went back down to the tents and crouched by Sean's. "Hey," I whispered. "You up?" He stirred a little and mumbled something. I nudged the side of the tent. Seriously, come here. You gotta see this. After some grumbling, he unzipped the tent and came out, pulling on his jacket. What? I pointed up toward the ridge. Look, right above the trees. He stared for a few seconds. Where? There. Right, wait. I pointed again, lining it up with the notch in the trees we used as a marker during hikes. It was right there, like 20 seconds ago. But it was gone. Just stars and the thin black line of the ridge. Sean squinted. You sure you weren't dreaming? No, man. I was standing right there. It wasn't a star, it was hovering. Maybe a plane? Planes don't just stop mid-air like that. He yawned. Well, nothing there now. Come back to bed before you freeze. He zipped up his tent and went back in. I stood there for another few minutes, scanning the tree line. I even climbed back up to the flat rock. Still nothing, just silence and dark forest. I went back to my tent, but I didn't sleep. The next morning, I brought it up at breakfast. Greg joked that I must have had more bourbon than I remembered. Chris asked if it might have been a weather balloon. I told them again. No sound, no movement, no blinking. They kind of brushed it off. We went on a long hike that day up toward Goose Creek Trail. I kept checking the ridge as we climbed, looking for anything that seemed off. Didn't see anything. The day was normal, just hiking, water breaks, photos of aspens. That night, we sat around the fire again, this time burning bigger logs since it had gotten colder. Everyone went to bed around 11. I stayed up a little longer, poking at the fire, staring at the ridge. At 2:14 a.m., I remember the time exactly, I saw the light again. Same place, same shape, same silence. But this time, it didn't stay still. It moved, slowly, almost like it was drifting, from left to right, following the curve of the ridge. Still completely silent. I watched it for maybe 5 full minutes. It moved so gradually that I had to pick points along the ridge to tell it was moving at all. At one point, it dipped lower just above the tree tongue and rose again. I ran to wake up Chris. He came out, annoyed. I dragged him up to the flat rock. Pointed. There, it's moving right above those pines. He stared hard. I don't see anything, he said. It's right. How do you not see that? It's just stars, man. You're freaking yourself out. I swear the thing was right there, maybe 200 or 300 feet above the ridge. Clear as anything. But Chris just shook his head and went back down to his tent. As soon as he was gone, the lights stopped moving. It hovered for maybe 10 more seconds. Then, and this is hard to explain, it just dimmed. Like a slow fade. Not like it flew away. More like it was turning itself off. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I didn't see it again after that. Not on the last night. Not on the hike out. But something weird happened when I got home. I had taken a bunch of photos during the trip. Shots of the camp, the trees, the trail. I had my phone out a lot, especially during that second night when I was trying to zoom in on the ridge to catch the light. I was almost sure I'd hit record at least once. But when I checked my gallery, there were only pictures from the first day. Nothing from the second night. No photos after 7 p.m. Friday. No videos at all. I thought maybe I hadn't hit record or I'd just forgotten. But later that week, Sean sent around a bunch of group photos, and one of them showed me standing at the campfire that second night, holding my phone up, facing the ridge. Like I was filming something. I never found those files. I even plugged the phone into my laptop and checked hidden folders. Nothing. The others don't talk about it anymore. They just act like I had some weird dream. But I know what I saw, it was there, and they were standing right next to me,